It usually hits you in the quiet moments. You sit down to rest, and instead of relief, your thoughts get louder. Tasks you already finished come back. Conversations replay. Things you forgot, things you should have said. Your mind feels like a browser with 50 tabs open, and somehow every one of them is playing sound. You are not being dramatic. You are not weak. Something real is happening inside your head, and once you see it clearly, the noise starts to make sense. Here is the part that most people never hear. Your mind is not overloaded because you are doing too much. It is overloaded because it is trying to do everything at the same time without closure. Modern life trains your brain to constantly switch context. 1 minute you are answering a message. The next you are scrolling. Then you remember an email you did not send. Then a responsibility you pushed to tomorrow. Each switch leaves behind a mental residue. Psychologists call this attentional residue. It is the reason even simple tasks feel heavy. Part of your mind is still stuck on the last thing you touched, like mental fingerprints you cannot wipe off. Your brain was never designed for this level of fragmentation. Thousands of years ago, your attention focused on one threat or one goal at a time. Now it is pulled in 100 directions before breakfast. Notifications, expectations, news, other people's emotions, even your own future and past competing for space. Every one of these demands feels small on its own. Together they create a constant background pressure that never shuts off. And here is the shock most people miss. Rest does not fix this kind of overload. Scrolling does not fix it. Even sleep only partially helps. Because the issue is not exhaustion. It is unresolved input. Your mind keeps track of open loops. Anything unfinished or unclear stays active in your mental workspace. That is why relaxing sometimes feels impossible. Your brain thinks it is protecting you by keeping everything accessible. In reality, it is drowning you in reminders. There is also a chemical layer to this. Dopamine is not just a pleasure chemical. It is a motivation signal. Every new piece of information gives a small hit. Your brain learns to crave novelty because novelty feels productive. So you check one more thing, then another. Over time, your baseline attention drops. Focus feels uncomfortable. Silence feels wrong. The moment nothing is happening, your mind rushes to fill the gap. That is not a personal flaw. That is conditioning. If you have ever felt guilty for not being able to focus or relax, let that go. Your brain is responding exactly as it was trained to respond. It learned that being alert equals being safe. It learned that stillness means falling behind. It learned that if it stops scanning, it might miss something important. That is why your thoughts speed up the moment you try to slow down. There is also emotional weight mixed into the overload. Unspoken boundaries. People you need to reply to. Decisions you are avoiding. When emotions do not get processed, they turn into mental noise. The brain does not separate logic from feeling. It just registers unresolved. So it keeps everything running in the background like an alarm you cannot turn off. If any of this feels uncomfortably accurate, that is a good sign. It means the chaos has a structure. It means your mind is not broken. It is overloaded with meaning. And here is the part that matters most. Once you understand why the noise exists, you stop fighting it blindly. You stop trying to silence your thoughts and start listening for what they are pointing to. Mental clarity does not come from forcing calm. It comes from reducing the number of things your mind thinks it has to protect. That process starts with awareness. Noticing what keeps resurfacing. Noticing what you keep postponing. Noticing how often you switch without finishing. These small observations begin to close loops naturally. In the next layer of this conversation, there is a way to unload your mind without escaping your life, not by quitting everything or disappearing, but by working with how attention and emotion actually function. Once you see that path, the noise does not vanish overnight, but it loses its grip, and for the first time in a long while, your thoughts stop feeling like enemies and start feeling like signals you can finally understand. The hidden cost of mental noise in daily life. You rarely notice it happening. It does not announce itself as a problem. It slips into your day quietly, hiding behind productivity and business, until one day you realize everything feels harder than it should. Simple decisions drain you. Conversations feel heavier. Even moments that are supposed to feel good feel muted. That is mental noise at work, and the cost is far higher than most people realize. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Mental noise is not just annoying background chatter. It actively steals from your life in small, invisible ways. It eats at your energy before the day even begins. You wake up already tired, not because you slept badly, but because your mind never fully powered down. It was sorting, replaying, worrying, planning, all night long. So when morning comes, your mental battery is already half empty. What makes this dangerous is how normal it feels. You assume everyone feels this way. You assume this is adulthood, but chronic mental noise slowly reshapes how you experience everything. Your attention becomes shallow. You listen to people without fully hearing them. You skim moments instead of being inside them. You are present physically but absent mentally, and over time that absence starts to show up in your relationships. There is a psychological reason for this. The brain has a limited cognitive bandwidth. When it is clogged with internal noise, there is less room for empathy, creativity, and emotional regulation. That is why you snap at people you care about. That is why patience feels thin. It is not because you are becoming a worse person. It is because your mental resources are already maxed out before life even asks anything of you. Mental noise also distorts your sense of time. Tasks feel longer than they are. Days blur together. You feel busy without feeling accomplished. This happens because your brain never gets the satisfaction of completion. Every interruption resets your sense of progress. So even when you are moving, it feels like standing still. That constant feeling of falling behind creates low-grade stress that never fully leaves your body. And here is the part most people never connect. Mental noise directly affects your body. Elevated cortisol from constant mental stimulation keeps your nervous system in a mild fight or flight state. Digestion suffers. Sleep quality drops. Muscles stay tense. Over time, this turns into headaches, fatigue, and that vague sense that something is off even when nothing is technically wrong. Emotionally, the cost is just as high. Mental noise amplifies negative thoughts. When your mind is cluttered, it defaults to threat scanning. Old regrets resurface. Imagined futures feel overwhelming. Small problems feel catastrophic. This is not because things are worse. It is because noise removes perspective. Without mental space, your brain cannot zoom out. Everything feels immediate and urgent, even when it is not. You might notice this most in moments that should feel peaceful. Sitting with loved ones, being alone in nature, lying in bed at night. Instead of calm, your mind races. Instead of gratitude, you feel restless. This creates a painful loop. You start to believe something is wrong with you for not being able to enjoy your life. That belief adds another layer of noise. If this resonates, pause and breathe for a moment. Nothing about this makes you broken. It makes you human in an environment that constantly demands attention without offering resolution. Your mind is doing its best to keep up. The problem is not effort, it is overload without release. The real tragedy of mental noise is what it quietly robs you of: depth, joy, spontaneity, the ability to fully inhabit a moment without mentally narrating it. Over time, you stop trusting stillness because stillness feels uncomfortable, so you fill every gap with stimulation, music, videos, conversations, anything to avoid the noise, even though the avoidance keeps it alive. And yet, hidden inside this problem is an invitation. Mental noise is not random. It is information. It points to unmet needs, unresolved decisions, and boundaries that have been crossed too many times. When you start to see noise as a signal instead of an enemy, something shifts. You stop trying to drown it out and start asking what it needs. There is a way to lower the volume without escaping your responsibilities or changing who you are. It begins with understanding how your attention is being fragmented and how to gently reclaim it, not through force, but through clarity. Once you learn how to create even small pockets of mental space, the effects ripple outward. Decisions become easier. Emotions feel more manageable. Life feels less heavy. And that is when you realize the cost of mental noise was never just stress. It was the slow erosion of presence. The good news is that presence can be rebuilt one quiet layer at a time. How modern distractions fragment your attention. It starts innocently. You reach for your phone to check one thing. Just one. Before you know it, 10 minutes disappear, and you are not even sure what you just consumed. Your body stayed still, but your mind sprinted through messages, images, opinions, and tiny emotional spikes. When you finally look up, there is a strange fog in your head. You feel scattered, slightly irritated, and somehow behind. That feeling is not accidental. It is the direct result of how modern distractions slice your attention into pieces. Most people think distraction means being pulled away from work. That is only the surface. What is really happening is fragmentation. Your attention is not leaving and coming back intact. It is being divided, stretched, and thinned out until nothing gets your full presence. Every notification, every quick check, every swipe trains your brain to expect interruption as the default state. Here is the unsettling part. Your brain does not experience these interruptions as neutral. Each one carries a small emotional and cognitive cost. When you switch tasks, your mind has to reorient. What was I doing? Where was I? What matters right now? That reorientation burns energy. Do it once and you barely notice. Do it hundreds of times a day, and you live in a constant state of mental friction. There is a well-studied mechanism behind this. Attention does not switch cleanly. Part of it lingers on the previous task. That lingering pulls on your focus like an anchor. So even when you return to what you were doing, you are not fully there. This is why you reread the same sentence multiple times. Why simple work feels heavier than it should. Why you feel busy but strangely unproductive. Modern platforms are built around this weakness. They do not just distract you, they condition you. Each scroll delivers novelty. Each alert promises relevance. Your brain learns to stay alert for the next hit of information. Over time, sustained focus starts to feel uncomfortable. Silence feels empty. Deep work feels like deprivation. Your nervous system gets used to constant stimulation and mistakes it for normal. The shock comes when you realize this does not turn off when the screen goes dark. Fragmentation follows you into conversations. You half listen while thinking about something else. You nod while planning your response instead of absorbing what is being said. You are present in form, but divided in function. That division slowly erodes connection, even when intentions are good. Emotionally, fragmentation makes everything sharper and flatter at the same time. Small annoyances feel bigger. Big joys feel muted. This happens because attention is how emotion is processed. When your focus is split, feelings do not get fully experienced or resolved. They stack up. Unfinished emotional business becomes background noise, adding to the sense of mental overload you cannot quite name. If you recognize yourself in this, do not judge it. None of this means you lack discipline. It means you are human in a system designed to capture attention, not protect it. Your brain is doing what it evolved to do. It is responding to stimuli. The problem is not you. It is the volume and frequency of the stimuli. Think about the last time you were deeply absorbed in something. Reading, creating, talking with someone without checking the time. Notice how rare that feels now. Not because you do not want it, but because your attention muscle has been pulled in too many directions for too long. Like any muscle, it weakens when overused improperly. What makes this especially tricky is that fragmentation feels productive. You are responding, updating, staying informed. But constant partial attention gives you the illusion of control while quietly draining clarity. You know a little about many things, but you feel grounded in none of them. That lack of grounding feeds anxiety. Your mind is everywhere except where your body is. There is also a deeper cost. Fragmented attention fractures your sense of self. When your focus is constantly external, you lose touch with internal signals. Hunger, fatigue, emotional boundaries. You push past limits without noticing until burnout forces your hand. Then you wonder how you got there. If this feels heavy, stay with it. Awareness is the first interruption that actually helps. Simply noticing how often your attention is pulled and how it feels afterward begins to loosen the grip. Fragmentation thrives on unconscious habits. Clarity begins with conscious noticing. Your attention is not gone. It has been scattered, and anything scattered can be gathered, not all at once, not perfectly, but gently, deliberately, piece by piece. When you start protecting even small stretches of uninterrupted focus, something shifts. Your mind remembers what it feels like to settle, to stay, to finish a thought without being pulled away. That is not about rejecting modern life. It is about reclaiming ownership of your inner space. Once you see how distractions fragment you, you stop blaming yourself for feeling scattered. And in that moment, the possibility of wholeness quietly returns. Recognizing the signs of mental fatigue before burnout. Burnout rarely arrives with flashing warning lights. It creeps in quietly, disguised as productivity, responsibility, and doing what needs to be done. You tell yourself you are just tired. You push through one more day, then another. Somewhere along the way, your inner world starts to feel dull and strained, but because you are still functioning, you ignore it. That is where mental fatigue lives, not at the breaking point, but long before it. One of the first signs is a strange resistance to things that used to feel simple. You open your laptop and feel an immediate heaviness. You look at your to-do list and your mind pulls away instead of leaning in. Nothing is technically hard, yet everything feels effortful. This is not laziness. It is your brain signaling that its cognitive reserves are running low. Mental fatigue shows up in how you think before it shows up in how you act. Your thoughts become rigid. You struggle to see options. Decisions feel overwhelming even when the stakes are low. This happens because your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and regulation, is under strain. When it is overworked, flexibility disappears. You default to habits, shortcuts, and avoidance, not because you want to, but because your brain is conserving energy. Another subtle sign is emotional flattening. You stop feeling highs and lows. Joy feels muted. Frustration feels constant but quiet. You are not exploding, but you are not fully alive either. This emotional numbness is often mistaken for stability. In reality, it is a protective response. Your nervous system dampens emotion when it feels overwhelmed, creating distance from both pleasure and pain. You might also notice a growing impatience with people. Sounds feel louder. Questions feel intrusive. Conversations feel draining. This is not because others suddenly became difficult. It is because mental fatigue reduces your capacity for social processing. Empathy requires cognitive space. When that space is depleted, even small interactions can feel like too much. Sleep changes are another early indicator. You may still sleep for many hours, but wake up feeling unrested. Or your mind races at night, replaying the day or jumping ahead to tomorrow. This happens because mental fatigue keeps your stress hormones elevated. Your body lies down, but your nervous system stays alert, unable to fully power down. One of the most deceptive signs is increased productivity paired with decreased satisfaction. You are getting things done, maybe more than ever, but nothing feels rewarding. Each task completed brings no sense of closure, only the pressure of the next one. This is how burnout hides behind achievement. The brain continues to perform while the inner experience quietly erodes. There is also a physical layer that often gets ignored. Frequent headaches, tight shoulders, jaw tension, shallow breathing. These are not random aches. They are the body expressing what the mind has been carrying. When mental fatigue goes unrecognized, the body becomes the messenger. If you are nodding along, pause here. This is not a diagnosis. It is recognition. Mental fatigue is not a personal failure. It is a natural response to prolonged cognitive and emotional demand without adequate recovery. Modern life rewards endurance, not restoration. So most people do not realize they are depleted until burnout forces them to stop. The most important shift is learning to recognize these signs without judgment. The moment you label them as weakness, you override the signal. But when you see them as information, something changes. Fatigue stops being an enemy and starts becoming guidance. There is a critical window between mental fatigue and burnout. In this window, small adjustments make a massive difference. You do not need to quit your job or escape your life. You need to reduce cognitive load and increase psychological safety. That can look like finishing fewer tasks, but actually finishing them, like setting boundaries around attention, like allowing your mind to be offline without guilt. One powerful indicator you are approaching burnout is when rest starts to feel uncomfortable, when doing nothing triggers anxiety, when silence feels wrong. That is a sign your nervous system has forgotten how to downshift. Recognizing that early allows you to retrain it gently instead of forcing a crash. Burnout is not caused by working too much alone. It is caused by working without recovery, meaning, or control. Mental fatigue is the whisper before the scream. It asks for adjustment, not collapse. The people who recover fastest from burnout are not the strongest pushers. They are the earliest listeners. They notice when focus slips, when emotions dull, when the body tightens. They respond early with curiosity instead of criticism. If you learn to recognize mental fatigue as it arises, you reclaim choice. You can slow down before you break down. You can rest before you are empty. And most importantly, you stop seeing exhaustion as the price of a meaningful life. Your mind is not asking you to quit. It is asking you to pay attention. Clearing the mind vests escaping reality. Most people think a clear mind means getting away, turning everything off, disappearing for a while, taking a break from life itself. So they scroll to numb out, binge to forget, stay busy to avoid feeling, or fantasize about escaping to somewhere quieter. And for a moment it works. The pressure drops, the noise fades. But the second reality returns, so does the weight. That is how you know it was never clarity. It was escape. Clearing your mind and escaping reality feel similar on the surface, but they do completely opposite things to your inner world. One creates space, the other postpones reckoning, and most people unknowingly spend years choosing escape, wondering why they never feel truly rested afterward. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Escape gives your mind a break from awareness, not from load. The unresolved thoughts do not disappear. They wait. They pile up quietly. So when you finally stop distracting yourself, everything rushes back at once. That is why silence can feel overwhelming. Your mind is not afraid of quiet. It is afraid of what quiet reveals. Clearing your mind is not about running from thoughts. It is about letting them complete their cycle. The brain is designed to process, not suppress. When you distract yourself every time discomfort appears, you interrupt that process. The thought stays unfinished. The emotion stays unintegrated. Over time, your mind becomes crowded with half-felt experiences and half-made decisions. This is where many people get confused. They believe thinking less will bring peace, so they try to shut their mind down, force positivity, stay entertained. But peace does not come from fewer thoughts. It comes from fewer unresolved ones. A clear mind is not empty. It is organized. There is a biological reason escape feels tempting. When you distract yourself, your brain gets a hit of dopamine. Novelty feels relieving. It creates a sense of movement without resolution. Clearing your mind, on the other hand, often feels slower at first. It requires staying present with what is uncomfortable long enough for your nervous system to learn that nothing bad is happening. That is why escape feels easier and clarity feels intimidating. Look closely at how you rest. Do you come back feeling grounded, or just temporarily numb? Do you feel more connected to yourself, or more detached? True mental clarity leaves you feeling stable even when life is still demanding. Escape leaves you dependent on the next distraction. Another key difference shows up in your emotions. Escape flattens them. Clearing sharpens and then settles them. When you clear your mind, emotions move through you instead of stacking on top of each other. That movement can feel intense at first. Sadness surfaces, frustration speaks, fatigue becomes obvious. But this is not harm. This is release. Psychologically, avoidance keeps the amygdala on high alert. It never gets the signal that a perceived threat has been faced and survived. Clearing your mind allows your prefrontal cortex to reassert control. You name what is happening. You feel it fully. The alarm quiets. That is how safety is restored internally. A clear mind does not require isolation or silence or hours of meditation. It requires honesty. What am I carrying that I keep pushing away? What decision am I avoiding? What feeling am I not letting finish? These questions do more for clarity than any form of escape ever will. This is where many people resist, because clarity brings responsibility. When you see clearly, you cannot unsee. You might realize you are overcommitted, or disconnected, or living on autopilot. Escape lets you avoid those realizations. Clearing forces you to meet yourself where you actually are. But here is the relief hidden inside that discomfort. When you stop escaping, your mind stops chasing you. The energy you spent running becomes available again. Focus returns naturally. Presence deepens without effort. You stop needing constant stimulation because your inner world is no longer screaming for attention. One of the clearest signs you are escaping instead of clearing is when rest makes you feel guilty or anxious. That anxiety is not proof you are doing something wrong. It is proof your mind has learned to equate stillness with danger. Clearing gently retrains that association. Little by little, stillness becomes safe again. Clearing your mind does not mean rejecting reality. It means engaging with it without resistance. It means allowing thoughts to rise and fall without grabbing or pushing. It means finishing internal conversations instead of replaying them endlessly. It is an active process, even though it looks calm from the outside. Escape promises relief without effort. Clarity offers peace with presence. One numbs, the other integrates. One delays, the other resolves. If you have been chasing quiet by running away from yourself, you are not failing. You are surviving the only way you knew how. But there is another option. One that does not require changing your life, only changing how you meet it. When you learn the difference between clearing and escaping, you stop trying to outrun your mind. You turn toward it instead. And in that turning, the noise finally begins to settle, not because reality disappeared, but because you are no longer fighting it. The science behind mental clarity and focus. Most people treat mental clarity like a personality trait. Some people just have it, others do not. You either wake up focused or you do not. But clarity is not magic and it is not luck. It is biology responding to conditions. When those conditions are right, your mind sharpens almost automatically. When they are wrong, no amount of willpower can force focus to stay. What makes this frustrating is that the modern world constantly pushes your brain into the exact conditions that destroy clarity, then tells you to try harder, focus harder, concentrate more, power through. That advice ignores how the brain actually works. Your mind is not a machine that responds to pressure. It is a system that responds to signals of safety, relevance, and energy. At the center of clarity is your prefrontal cortex. This is the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, impulse control, and sustained attention. When it is online and supported, you feel calm, clear, and capable. When it is overwhelmed, everything feels scattered. You forget things. You procrastinate. You feel mentally clumsy. This is not a character flaw. It is a neural state. Here is the shock most people miss. Stress does not just make you feel bad. It physically downshifts your brain. When stress hormones like cortisol stay elevated, blood flow is redirected away from the prefrontal cortex toward more primitive survival regions. Your brain becomes reactive instead of reflective. Short-term thinking replaces long-term clarity. This is why anxiety and focus cannot coexist for long. One shuts down the other. Clarity also depends on something surprisingly basic: energy availability. Your brain uses a massive amount of glucose and oxygen. When you are sleep-deprived, under-effed, or constantly overstimulated, your brain enters conservation mode. Focus becomes expensive. Distraction becomes tempting. That pull toward easy stimulation is not weakness. It is your brain looking for low-cost energy. There is also a chemical balance involved. Dopamine helps you initiate focus, but too much fragmented dopamine from constant novelty destroys it. Each small hit from checking, scrolling, or switching trains your brain to seek new input instead of staying with one thing. Over time, baseline dopamine sensitivity drops. What used to feel engaging now feels boring. You think you lack discipline, but your reward system is simply overstimulated. Clarity emerges when your nervous system feels safe enough to stay present. This is where the parasympathetic system matters. When your body senses safety, breathing slows, muscles relax, and the brain regains access to higher-order thinking. This is why people often get their best ideas in the shower or on a walk. Not because they are trying harder, but because their nervous system finally downshifts. Another key piece is cognitive load. Your working memory can only hold a few items at once. When it is overloaded with reminders, worries, and unfinished tasks, there is no space left for focus. The brain cannot prioritize when everything feels urgent. This is why writing things down creates instant relief. It is not productivity, it is offloading. The brain relaxes when it knows it does not have to remember everything. Emotion plays a larger role than most people realize. Unprocessed emotion consumes attention in the background. Even if you are not actively thinking about it, your brain allocates resources to monitoring unresolved feelings. This is why clarity often follows emotional honesty. When a feeling is acknowledged and allowed to move, attention is freed. Focus improves not because you tried to concentrate, but because internal resistance dropped. There is also a rhythm to focus that modern life ignores. The brain works best in cycles of engagement and rest. When you push continuously without recovery, neural fatigue builds. Focus degrades quietly. You might still be working, but your effectiveness drops. This is why short breaks restore clarity better than forcing longer hours. Rest is not the opposite of focus. It is a requirement for it. If you have ever wondered why clarity feels effortless some days and impossible others, this is why. Your brain state matters more than your motivation. When sleep, emotion, stress, and stimulation are aligned, focus emerges naturally. When they are not, trying harder only creates more friction. Here is the validating part. If you struggle with clarity, it does not mean you are broken. It means your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do under pressure. The modern environment is cognitively hostile. Constant alerts, open loops, emotional demands, and artificial urgency push your brain into survival mode. Clarity cannot thrive there. The encouraging truth is that clarity is trainable, not through forcing attention, but through creating the conditions that support it. Reducing cognitive load, calming the nervous system, allowing emotions to complete, protecting periods of low stimulation. These changes tell your brain it is safe to focus again. When people experience true mental clarity, they often describe it as returning home. Thoughts line up, decisions feel obvious, effort drops. This is not because life became simpler. It is because internal friction decreased. The brain stopped fighting itself. Once you understand the science behind clarity, you stop blaming yourself for losing focus. You stop chasing hacks and start shaping environments. And when you do that, focus stops being something you force and starts being something that shows up on its own. Clarity is not a peak state reserved for monks or geniuses. It is your brain functioning as intended. When you support it instead of overwhelming it, that clarity becomes less rare and more reliable. And once you feel that difference, you never look at distraction or exhaustion the same way again. Why rest alone doesn't always restore clarity. You finally get a break. No meetings, no messages, no one asking anything from you. You sit down ready to rest, expecting your mind to soften, but instead of clarity, Your thoughts get louder. You feel restless, almost irritated. You think, this was supposed to help. And that moment right there is where most people get confused about what rest actually does. We are taught that rest is the cure for mental overload. If you are tired, sleep more. If you are stressed, take time off. If your mind feels messy, slow down. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it does not. And when it does not, people assume something is wrong with them. The truth is simpler and harder to accept. Rest alone does not restore clarity if the mind is still carrying unresolved weight. Here is the part no one explains. Rest reduces stimulation, but it does not automatically reduce mental load. When you stop moving, your mind finally has space to surface what it has been holding back. Unfinished decisions, suppressed emotions, lingering worries. During busy periods, these things stay muted by noise. When the noise drops, they rush forward. That is why vacations sometimes feel disappointing. You arrive exhausted, hoping to relax, and instead feel anxious or numb. Your nervous system has been in high gear for so long that slowing down feels unsafe. The mind mistakes stillness for loss of control. So instead of clarity, you get agitation. There is also a biological reason this happens. Chronic stress keeps your body in a heightened state of alert. Even when external demands stop, stress hormones take time to settle. Resting physically without calming the nervous system is like parking a car while the engine is still revving. You are not moving, but you are not at ease either. Another overlooked piece is cognitive residue. If your mind is full of open loops, rest becomes uncomfortable. Your brain sees downtime as an opportunity to remind you of everything unfinished. That is not sabotage. That is protection. The brain wants closure. Without it, rest feels incomplete. This is why passive rest often fails. Watching something, scrolling, lying down without intention. These activities distract, but they do not resolve. They delay processing. So when they end, the mental noise returns unchanged. You rested your body, but your mind stayed on duty. If you have ever thought, I took time off and I still feel overwhelmed, this is why. Clarity does not come from absence of activity alone. It comes from completion. Emotional completion, cognitive completion, nervous system completion. That does not mean rest is useless. It means rest needs support. Your mind needs signals of safety and resolution, not just silence. Sometimes that looks like writing down everything pulling at your attention. Sometimes it looks like letting yourself feel an emotion you have been avoiding. Sometimes it looks like making a small decision you have been postponing. The validating part is this. If rest has not been working for you, you are not broken, and you are not bad at relaxing. Your system is overloaded, not lazy. It needs guidance, not escape. Real clarity feels different from simple rest. It feels settled, grounded, like things have a place again. You can sit without needing to fill the space. Thoughts still come, but they do not pile up. That state does not come from stopping life. It comes from meeting it more honestly. Once you understand this, you stop chasing rest as a cure-all. You stop blaming yourself when time off does not fix everything. And you start approaching clarity as an active process, even when it looks calm from the outside. Rest is the doorway, but clarity comes from what you allow to pass through it. Letting go of unnecessary mental commitments. There are thoughts you carry that feel important, but if you are honest, they are not actually serving you anymore. Promises you never agreed to out loud. Expectations you absorbed without questioning. Responsibilities that live only in your head. They follow you through the day quietly, creating pressure you cannot explain. You feel busy even when nothing urgent is happening. That is the weight of unnecessary mental commitments. Most mental exhaustion does not come from what you are actually doing. It comes from what you believe you should be doing. The email you feel obligated to reply to immediately. The role you think you have to play for everyone. The version of yourself you are constantly trying to maintain. None of these show up on a calendar, but they take up enormous space in your mind. Here is the part that surprises people. Your brain does not distinguish between real obligations and imagined ones. If you think something is your responsibility, your nervous system treats it as a threat if it is not handled. That is why you feel tension even when nothing is happening. Your mind is guarding commitments that were never consciously chosen. A mental commitment is anything your brain believes it must remember, manage, or protect. It could be a future conversation you keep rehearsing, a goal that no longer matters but still demands attention, a worry you revisit out of habit. Over time, these stack up. Individually, they seem harmless. Together, they create constant low-level stress. One reason these commitments are hard to release is because they are tied to identity. Letting go feels like failing, like being irresponsible, like disappointing someone. But holding on quietly drains you. You become mentally loyal to things that no longer align with who you are. Notice how often your mind says things like, "I should remember this," or "I need to think about that later." Every time that happens, a loop opens. Your brain keeps it active because it does not trust that it is safe to let go. That is why writing things down feels relieving. Not because it solves the problem, but because it gives your brain permission to stand down. Another category of unnecessary commitment is emotional, carrying other people's moods. Feeling responsible for how everyone feels around you. Replaying moments where you think you should have done better. These are not acts of care. They are acts of overextension. Compassion does not require constant mental labor. There is a difference between responsibility and burden. Responsibility is chosen and actionable. Burden is vague and endless. Mental clarity comes from learning to tell the difference. Ask yourself, is there an action here, or just pressure? If there is no clear action, your mind does not need to hold it. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop mentally micromanaging what you cannot control. Your brain is not meant to be a storage unit for unresolved expectations. It is meant to respond to the present. The validating truth is that many of these commitments were picked up unconsciously. You did not choose them. You adapted to survive, to belong, to succeed. At one point they helped. Now they are outdated software running in the background. Releasing them starts with awareness, not force. You notice what keeps resurfacing. You question whether it still deserves space. You decide deliberately instead of carrying automatically. Sometimes the most powerful clarity move is saying, "This no longer needs my attention." When you let go of unnecessary mental commitments, something subtle but profound happens. Your mind quiets without effort. Decisions feel lighter, presence returns. You are not empty. You are available. You do not need to clear your mind completely. You just need to stop holding what was never yours to carry in the first place. And when you do, mental space opens up naturally, not because you pushed thoughts away, but because you finally gave them permission to leave. The power of slowing down your thoughts. Your thoughts are not actually racing. That is the first thing to understand. What feels like speed is compression. Too many thoughts stacked too closely together, without space to breathe. When people say my mind will not slow down, what they really mean is my mind will not give me room. And that lack of room is what creates overwhelm. Most of us try to solve this the wrong way. We try to stop thinking. We try to distract ourselves. We try to overpower the noise with effort. But thoughts do not respond to force. The harder you push, the louder they push back. That is why slowing down your thoughts feels impossible when you chase it directly. Here is the shift that changes everything. You do not slow thoughts by controlling them. You slow them by changing the conditions they move through. Thoughts speed up when your nervous system feels pressured. They slow down when it feels safe. This is not philosophical. It is biological. When your body is tense, breathing shallow, jaw tight, shoulders lifted, your brain interprets that as urgency. Urgency tells the mind to scan faster, to jump ahead, to problem solve without pause. Even if nothing is wrong, your thoughts behave as if something is. So they pile up, overlap, and feel uncontrollable. Slowing your thoughts begins in the body, not the mind. The moment your breathing deepens, even slightly, your brain gets a different signal. The alarm lowers. Thoughts naturally stretch out, not disappear, just slow enough to be followed. This is why moments of calm often arrive unexpectedly, in the shower, on a quiet walk, late at night when everything finally stops. It is not because you tried to think less. It is because your system finally relaxed enough to stop compressing information. Another reason thoughts speed up is emotional avoidance. When there is a feeling you do not want to face, the mind stays busy to avoid landing anywhere. Speed becomes a strategy. If you keep moving mentally, you do not have to feel. Slowing down threatens that avoidance. So the mind resists. That resistance is often misunderstood as lack of discipline. It is not. It is protection. Your brain believes that if it slows down, something uncomfortable will surface. And it is right. But uncomfortable does not mean dangerous. It means unfinished. When you allow thoughts to slow, you start to notice patterns. The same worries looping. The same themes returning. This is not failure. This is information. Speed hides repetition. Slowness reveals it. And once something is seen clearly, it loses its grip. There is also a powerful cognitive benefit to slowing down. When thoughts move slower, your prefrontal cortex stays engaged. That is the part of the brain that gives perspective. That lets you choose instead of react. When thoughts race, that system gets bypassed. You live in reflex mode. Slowing restores choice. You might notice that when your thoughts slow, time feels different. Moments expand. You stop rushing internally even if externally nothing has changed. That internal pacing is what creates clarity. Not the absence of thought, but the presence of space between them. This is where people often get frustrated. They expect immediate silence. But silence is not the goal. Coherence is. You want your thoughts to line up instead of collide, to arrive one at a time instead of all at once. Slowing down your thoughts does not make you less productive. It makes your actions more intentional. You stop reacting to every mental impulse. You choose which ones deserve energy. That alone reduces exhaustion. If your mind has felt loud or frantic, it is not because it is broken. It is because it has been running at emergency speed for too long. Slowing down is not quitting. It is recalibrating. The most reassuring part is this. Once your mind learns that slowing down is safe, it remembers how to do it again. You do not have to force it every time. The habit of speed can be unlearned. And when thoughts slow, something unexpected happens. You do not lose sharpness. You gain depth. You do not become passive. You become present. That is the quiet power of slowing down your thoughts. Not control, not silence, but space. Enough space to think clearly again. Breathwork techniques that instantly calm the mind. Your breath is already shaping your mind whether you notice it or not. Every shallow inhale, every held breath, every rushed exhale is sending instructions to your nervous system. Most of the time, those instructions say stay alert, stay tense, stay ready. That is why your mind can feel restless even when nothing is wrong. The calm you are looking for is not missing. It is being overridden. Here is what most people never realize. You cannot think your way into calm. Calm is not a mental decision. It is a physiological state. And breath is the fastest way to access it. Not because it is mystical, but because breathing is the only part of your nervous system you can consciously influence. When you are stressed or overwhelmed, your breathing naturally becomes shallow and quick. That pattern signals danger to the brain. The brain responds by speeding up thoughts, scanning for problems, replaying scenarios. The loop feeds itself. Fast breath creates fast thoughts. Fast thoughts create fast breath. Breathwork breaks that loop from the bottom up. The simplest and most effective place to start is slowing the exhale. Not forcing it. Just lengthening it slightly. Your nervous system is wired so that longer exhales activate the calming branch responsible for rest and regulation. Even one slow exhale tells your brain you are safe enough to stand down. Try noticing this without effort. Inhale normally. Then let the exhale be slower than the inhale. No counting required. Just softer and longer. Most people feel a shift within seconds. Shoulders drop, jaw loosens. Thoughts lose urgency. That is not imagination. That is biology responding. Another powerful technique is breathing into the lower body. When stress takes over, breathing stays high in the chest. That keeps the body in alert mode. When you breathe into your belly, you stimulate the vagus nerve, which directly communicates safety to the brain. Place a hand on your abdomen. Let it rise as you inhale. Let it fall fully as you exhale. The mind follows the body downward. You might notice resistance at first, a sense of restlessness. That is normal. Calm can feel unfamiliar if your system has been running fast for a long time. Stay with it gently. You are not forcing relaxation, you are allowing it. Another grounding approach is rhythmic breathing. Giving your breath a steady pattern helps organize your thoughts. Inhale slowly. Pause briefly. Exhale slowly. Pause again. The rhythm matters more than the depth. Predictable breathing gives the brain something stable to track. That stability reduces mental noise. What is important to understand is that breathwork is not about escaping thoughts. Thoughts may still arise. The difference is they lose their grip. They pass through instead of piling up. Calm does not mean empty. It means manageable. There is also an emotional release component many people are surprised by. When the breath slows, emotions that were held back can surface. A sigh, a wave of sadness, a feeling of relief. This is not a problem. It is completion. Your body letting go of stored tension. One reason breathwork works so quickly is because it bypasses overthinking. You do not need insight or understanding in the moment. You do not need to analyze why you are stressed. You simply change the signal. The brain responds automatically. If you have ever noticed yourself taking a deep breath before speaking or after a stressful moment, your body already knows this. Breathwork is just learning to do it on purpose. The key is consistency over intensity. 1 minute of conscious breathing done regularly is more powerful than forcing long sessions. Your nervous system learns through repetition. Each time you breathe calmly, you reinforce safety. Over time, calm becomes easier to access. If your mind has felt loud, scattered, or on edge, it does not need fixing. It needs reassurance. Breath is how you provide it. You do not have to wait for the perfect moment. You can do this sitting, standing, lying down, in the middle of a busy day, before sleep, during stress. Breath meets you where you are. When the mind feels overwhelmed, it is often because the body feels unheard. Breathwork is listening without words. And the more you listen, the quieter the mind becomes. Not because you silenced it, but because it finally got the message that it is safe to slow down. Releasing mental tension stored in the body. You can be sitting perfectly still and still feel exhausted. Your day might not have been physically demanding at all, yet your shoulders ache, your jaw feels tight, your stomach feels knotted. That is not random discomfort. That is mental tension living in the body, and it builds quietly until you learn how to let it go. Most people think stress lives in the mind. In reality, the body is where it settles. Every time you suppress a reaction, hold back emotion, or push through when you are overwhelmed, your muscles contract. Your nervous system prepares for action that never comes. The body does not forget that preparation. It stores it. That is why mental stress feels physical. Tight neck, shallow breathing, heavy chest. You are not imagining it. The brain and body are in constant conversation. When the mind feels pressured, the body braces. When the body stays braced, the mind stays alert. The loop feeds itself. Here is the part that surprises people. You cannot think your way out of stored tension. Insight alone does not release it. Understanding why you are stressed does not tell your shoulders to relax. The body needs direct signals that it is safe to let go. Tension often hides in places you are no longer aware of. The jaw clenching all day. The tongue pressed to the roof of the mouth. The stomach pulled inward. These patterns become so familiar they feel neutral. But they cost energy constantly. You are burning fuel just to stay tight. One of the clearest signs of stored tension is difficulty fully relaxing even when you try. You lie down, but your body feels alert. You stretch, but something resists. That resistance is not stubbornness. It is protection. Your nervous system learned that staying tight helped you cope. It just never learned when to stop. Releasing tension begins with awareness, not force. The moment you notice a tight area without trying to change it, you interrupt the automatic pattern. Attention itself is a signal. It tells the body you are present and listening. Breath plays a critical role here. When you breathe shallowly, tension holds. When you breathe fully, especially into areas that feel tight, the body starts to soften. You might feel subtle movements, a yawn, a sigh, a wave of warmth. These are signs of release, not weakness. There is often emotion tied to stored tension. The chest holds grief. The jaw holds anger. The gut holds fear. This is not poetic language. It is how the nervous system organizes experience. When release begins, emotion can surface briefly. Let it. Suppressing it is what created the tension in the first place. Gentle movement is another key. Not intense exercise. Slow, deliberate movement that invites sensation. Rolling the shoulders. Stretching the neck slowly. Rocking slightly. These movements remind the body that it has options beyond bracing. One powerful approach is progressive relaxation. You gently tense a muscle group, then slowly release it. This contrast teaches the nervous system the difference between effort and ease. Many people have forgotten what relaxed actually feels like. This retraining brings it back. The validating truth is this: if your body feels tight, it does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you adapted. You carried more than was comfortable for longer than was ideal. Your body stepped in to help. Release is not dramatic. It is subtle. It happens in layers. Each small letting go creates space. That space reduces mental noise. The mind calms because the body no longer needs to stay on guard. As tension releases, you may notice your thoughts slow without effort. Your breathing deepens naturally. Your awareness drops out of your head and into your body. This is grounding. This is clarity returning through sensation, not analysis. You do not need to fix your body. You need to reassure it. Safety is the language it understands. When you allow tension to release instead of fighting it, your system learns that it does not have to hold everything together alone. And in that learning, both the body and the mind begin to rest. Clarity does not always come from thinking differently. Sometimes it comes from finally letting your body exhale what it has been holding for far too long. How stillness rewires your brain for clarity. Stillness feels uncomfortable for a reason. The moment everything stops, your mind rushes in to fill the space. Thoughts get louder. Impatience creeps up. You feel the urge to reach for something, anything. That reaction convinces many people that stillness is not for them. But that discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that something important is happening in your brain. Your brain is used to movement, input, stimulation. When those disappear, it has to switch modes. And that switch is where clarity begins. Most of your day is spent in a reactive state, responding to messages, processing information, anticipating what comes next. This keeps your brain locked in task-oriented networks designed for action and survival. Useful, but expensive. Stillness interrupts that pattern. It tells the brain there is no immediate demand, no threat to track, no problem to solve right now. When that signal repeats, your brain begins to rewire. There is a network in the brain often active during quiet moments, reflection, and rest. This network helps integrate information, process emotion, and make sense of experience. When life is constant motion, this system never gets time to work. Thoughts stay fragmented. Emotions stay unresolved. Clarity stays out of reach. Stillness activates this integrative mode. At first, the brain resists. It sends thoughts to pull you back into activity, planning, remembering, worrying. This is not sabotage, it is habit. The brain has learned that busy equals safe. Stillness feels unfamiliar, so it tests it. If you stay anyway, something shifts. Neural activity begins to slow. Stress hormones drop. The prefrontal cortex regains influence. Thoughts become less urgent and more coherent. You stop reacting to every mental impulse and start observing them. That distance is clarity forming. What makes this powerful is repetition. Each time you allow stillness without escaping it, your brain learns that nothing bad happens when things slow down. Over time, the alarm response weakens. Stillness stops feeling like danger and starts feeling like relief. This is how rewiring happens. Not through force, but through exposure paired with safety. Stillness also improves attention. When the brain is not constantly pulled outward, it regains the ability to sustain focus. You become less reactive, more deliberate. Thoughts arrive one at a time instead of all at once. That spacing is what makes thinking feel clear instead of chaotic. Emotionally, stillness allows feelings to complete. Instead of being pushed aside by stimulation, they move through naturally. This reduces background tension you did not even realize you were carrying. When emotional load drops, mental clarity rises. Many people avoid stillness because they expect emptiness. But emptiness is not what you find. You find order. Your mind starts sorting itself without effort. Connections form. Insights surface, not because you chased them, but because you stopped interrupting the process. Stillness does not mean doing nothing forever. It means giving your brain regular moments where it does not have to perform. These moments act like a reset. They recalibrate your nervous system and sharpen your thinking without strain. Even short periods matter. A few minutes of sitting without input, a walk without music, pausing before reacting. These small acts compound. They train your brain to access clarity faster, even during busy days. If stillness feels difficult, that does not mean you need it less. It means you need it more. The discomfort is the rewiring in progress. Clarity is not something you chase in motion. It emerges in the space between. And the more often you return to that space, the more your brain remembers how to think clearly again, even when life speeds back up. Stillness is not absence. It is preparation. And once your brain learns that, clarity stops feeling rare and starts feeling natural. Training your mind to stay present without effort. Presence is often treated like a skill you have to force. Pay attention. Stay here. Stop drifting. The harder you try, the more effortful it feels. Your mind wanders, you notice it, you pull it back, and within seconds it slips away again. That cycle convinces people that presence takes discipline they do not have. But effortless presence is not created through control. It is created through alignment. Your mind is not wandering because it is lazy. It wanders because it is searching. Searching for safety, relevance, resolution. When those needs are unmet, attention keeps moving. It scans the past and future, looking for something to stabilize around. Trying to pin it down without addressing those needs is like telling a restless body to sit still without letting it rest. Effortless presence begins when the mind no longer feels the need to escape the moment, and that only happens when the present moment feels tolerable, sometimes even supportive. Here is the shift most people miss. You do not train presence by focusing harder. You train it by removing the reasons your mind avoids the now. Discomfort, uncertainty, emotional residue. When those soften, presence happens naturally. Think about moments when you are effortlessly present, watching a sunset, laughing with someone, doing something creative. You are not trying to be present. You just are. That is because your nervous system feels safe enough to settle. Attention stays because it wants to, not because it is forced. Presence is a nervous system state before it is a mental one. When your body feels tense, your mind stays alert. When your body softens, your mind follows. That is why practices that calm the body often create presence without effort. Slower breathing, gentle movement, even grounding sensations like feeling your feet on the floor. These cues tell your system that it does not need to be elsewhere. Another barrier to presence is internal pressure, the constant sense that you should be doing something else, thinking about something else, being someone else. That pressure pulls attention forward. Presence returns when you give yourself permission to be where you are without fixing it. Notice how often your mind leaves the present to evaluate it. Is this productive? Is this enough? Am I wasting time? Those questions create distance. They turn the moment into an object instead of an experience. Effortless presence comes when evaluation drops and experience takes the lead. Emotion also plays a role. Unfelt emotions pull attention away from now. If there is sadness, frustration, or fear you are avoiding, the mind will not stay present because presence would mean feeling. When emotions are allowed instead of resisted, attention no longer needs to flee. This does not mean digging into feelings constantly. It means not pushing them away. A quiet acknowledgement is often enough, something like "I notice tension" or "I feel tired." That recognition alone reduces resistance. Resistance is what makes presence hard. Another key is reducing internal multitasking. When you are doing one thing while mentally preparing for the next, presence fractures. Training presence means practicing finishing moments, letting one thing complete before moving on. Even in small ways, finish a bite before thinking about the next. Finish a sentence before planning your response. These micro-completions anchor attention. The validating truth is that your mind already knows how to be present. You do not need to install anything new. You need to stop overriding it. Presence is the default when the system is not overloaded. As you remove pressure, soften the body, and allow experience to unfold without commentary, presence becomes less effortful. You stop checking whether you are present. You simply notice that you are. Over time, this changes how your mind behaves. It stops scanning constantly. It trusts the moment more. That trust is what keeps attention anchored. Effortless presence is not about holding attention still. It is about making stillness feel safe. When the present moment no longer feels like something to escape, the mind stays on its own. And that is when clarity deepens. Not because you worked for it, but because you finally stopped getting in the way. Presence without effort is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. And once allowed, it quietly reshapes how you experience everything else. Detaching from overthinking without suppressing thoughts. Overthinking feels like a trap because it convinces you that thinking more is the solution. If you just analyze it one more time, replay it once more, imagine every possible outcome, then maybe you will finally feel settled. But instead you feel tighter, more stuck, more mentally exhausted. And the harder you try to stop thinking, the louder your thoughts become. That is where most people go wrong. They think the answer is suppression. Shut it down. Distract yourself. Push the thoughts away. But suppression does not create peace. It creates pressure. Thoughts do not disappear when you push them down. They wait. And when your guard drops, they come back stronger. Detaching from overthinking is something completely different. It is not about silencing thoughts. It is about changing your relationship to them. Right now, overthinking feels overwhelming because every thought feels important, urgent, personal. Your mind treats each one like it needs immediate attention. That is why it pulls you in. Detachment begins when you stop treating thoughts like commands and start seeing them as events. A thought is something that happens, not something you have to follow. This shift alone reduces intensity. When you notice a thought instead of merging with it, space appears. You are no longer inside the thought. You are observing it, and observation naturally creates distance without force. The brain is constantly generating content, memories, predictions, judgments. That is its job. Overthinking happens when you identify with that content and believe every thought requires action or resolution. Detachment is realizing that most thoughts are just noise produced by a pattern-seeking system. Here is the key insight. You do not need to stop thoughts to detach from them. You need to stop feeding them with attention and emotional urgency. Thoughts gain momentum when you argue with them, judge them, or try to fix them. Neutral awareness starves them gently. Notice what happens when you label a thought simply as thinking. Not good or bad. Not true or false. Just thinking. That simple acknowledgement pulls you out of the loop. The thought may still be there, but it no longer has the same grip. Another reason overthinking feels uncontrollable is emotional avoidance. The mind spins to avoid landing on a feeling. Detaching does not mean avoiding emotion. It means letting the emotion exist without building a story around it. When the feeling is allowed, the thought storm often calms on its own. Your body also plays a role here. Overthinking is amplified when the body is tense. Tight muscles tell the brain there is something to solve. Softening the body sends a different message. You might notice that when your shoulders drop or your breath slows, thoughts lose urgency without any mental effort. Detachment also comes from recognizing repetition. Overthinking rarely produces new information. It circles the same themes, the same worries, the same what-ifs. When you see that pattern clearly, you stop expecting a breakthrough from it. That expectation is what keeps you hooked. There is relief in realizing that you do not have to finish every thought. Some thoughts are incomplete by nature. Letting them pass unfinished is not irresponsible. It is realistic. The validating truth is this: overthinking developed to protect you. It is your mind trying to prevent mistakes or pain. Thanking it mentally instead of fighting it can soften the struggle. Resistance creates friction. Acceptance creates distance. Detaching does not make you passive or careless. It makes you selective. You still think, you still plan, but you choose which thoughts deserve engagement. The rest are allowed to come and go without commentary. Over time, this rewires how your mind behaves. Thoughts still appear, but they feel quieter, slower, less sticky. You stop feeling chased by your own head. The freedom is not in having fewer thoughts. It is in realizing you are not required to follow every one of them. When you detach without suppressing, thinking becomes lighter, spacious, useful again. And in that space, clarity emerges naturally, not because you forced your mind to be quiet, but because you finally stopped wrestling with it. The role of silence in mental reset. Silence can feel unsettling at first. You turn everything off, and instead of peace, your mind starts talking louder. Thoughts rush in. Old worries surface. You feel the urge to fill the space with noise again. That reaction makes many people believe silence does not work for them. But that discomfort is not silence failing. It is silence doing its job. Most of your mental fatigue comes from constant input, conversations, notifications, information. Even background noise keeps your brain in processing mode. Silence removes that input, and when it does, your mind finally has the chance to reset. Not instantly, not comfortably, but honestly. Here is what silence actually does. It interrupts the endless demand placed on your attention. Your brain is always responding to something, even when you think you are resting. Silence tells your nervous system there is nothing to respond to right now. That signal is rare in modern life, and your system is not used to receiving it. At first, your mind fills the gap. This is normal. When external noise stops, internal noise becomes more noticeable. That does not mean silence is making things worse. It means you are hearing what was already there. Most people avoid silence precisely because they do not want to hear that. But if you stay, something shifts. The brain cannot stay loud forever without stimulation. After the initial surge of thoughts, activity begins to slow, neural firing decreases, stress hormones drop, your system recalibrates. This is the reset people are actually seeking when they distract themselves, but distraction never allows it to happen. Silence gives your brain space to integrate, memories organize, emotions settle, loose ends begin to close on their own. You do not have to actively think through everything. The brain does this naturally when it is not constantly interrupted. There is also a sensory reset happening. When sound drops away, your awareness spreads out. You notice breath, subtle sensations, the weight of your body. This grounding pulls attention out of constant thinking and into experience. That shift alone reduces mental noise. Many people confuse silence with isolation or emptiness. In reality, silence reconnects you to yourself. It gives you access to internal signals that are usually drowned out: fatigue, tension, needs. These signals are not problems. They are guidance. Silence is how you hear them. Another important role silence plays is emotional regulation. When there is constant noise, emotions stay stirred. Silence allows them to settle. You may feel a wave of sadness or relief or calm. That is emotional processing completing. Avoiding silence delays that process. Embracing it allows it to finish. Silence also restores perspective. When your mind is no longer reacting to input, thoughts become less urgent. Problems feel more manageable. You stop catastrophizing. This happens because your prefrontal cortex regains control. Clarity returns not through effort, but through absence of interference. You do not need hours of silence for this to work. Even short moments matter. Sitting quietly for a few minutes, walking without music, pausing before speaking. These small silences add up. They teach your nervous system that quiet is safe. If silence feels uncomfortable, that does not mean you are bad at it. It means your mind has been busy for too long. The discomfort is temporary, the reset comes after. The validating truth is this: silence is not empty. It is restorative. It is where your mind stops performing and starts repairing. People who regularly allow silence notice something subtle but powerful. Their thoughts feel clearer. Their reactions slow. They feel more present without trying. That is not coincidence. That is the effect of giving the brain what it rarely gets. Silence is not about escaping the world. It is about giving your mind a chance to return to baseline, to remember how clarity feels when nothing is pulling at it. When you stop fearing silence, you stop fearing your own mind, and in that quiet space, mental reset happens naturally, not because you forced calm, but because you finally allowed it. Creating mental space without isolation. Most people assume creating mental space means leaving everything behind. Getting away from people, disconnecting from work, hiding somewhere quiet. And yes, that can help sometimes. But it is not the only way. You can carve out mental space while still living your life, while still showing up, and without retreating from everything you care about. The key is not distance. It is attention and boundaries. Your mind feels crowded not because life is too busy, but because you are carrying more than you need. Obligations that are not actually yours, worries about things you cannot control, thoughts that loop endlessly, rehearsing conversations or scenarios that may never happen. That weight clogs attention. It makes decisions harder, clarity elusive, and rest impossible. Creating mental space is learning how to release that load without running away. Here is the shift most people overlook. Your environment does not need to be empty for your mind to feel empty. You can be at a loud cafe, in a crowded office, or surrounded by family, and still create mental space. The trick is deciding what deserves your attention and what can wait. Most of your mental clutter exists in invisible obligations, the shoulds, coulds, and musts that are not urgent or necessary. They can go. One of the simplest ways to do this is micro-boundaries. Give yourself small pauses between tasks. After a meeting, take 10 seconds to exhale. Before answering a message, take a breath and notice your body. That moment of space might feel small, almost meaningless, but it is not. It gives the brain a chance to reset before picking up the next demand. Over time, those tiny moments accumulate into genuine mental breathing room. Another powerful tool is offloading, writing things down instead of holding them in your head. Your brain's working memory can only handle so much at once. When you try to remember everything, it becomes a cluttered desk in your mind. Notes spilling over, reminders flashing, deadlines piling up. Writing things down tells your brain, "I've got this." You can release the thought without losing control. Mental space grows automatically when your mind no longer has to carry everything. Attention itself is a muscle, and creating mental space is about training it to focus intentionally. You can be present in a crowded room, listening to someone, working on a project, or walking through your day, and still create space. How? By noticing where your attention drifts and gently bringing it back to what matters right now. Noticing the breath, the feeling of your feet on the floor, ambient sounds. The body knows these cues and the brain relaxes in response. Letting go of invisible obligations is another crucial piece. That thought that pops up, "I should have answered that email yesterday," or "I need to plan everything for next week," does not need to live in your head. Ask yourself, is this actionable now, or is it noise? Most of it is noise. Offload it. Write it down. Delete it. Delegate it. Every time you release these phantom responsibilities, your mind clears a little more space for what actually matters. Here is the validating truth: creating space is not control. It is alignment. Your brain relaxes when it stops holding more than it should. You do not need silence, solitude, or perfect conditions. You need choice. The choice to decide where attention goes and what energy is worth spending. That freedom alone creates mental breathing room. Over time, practicing these strategies transforms your day. Even when life is hectic, clarity emerges naturally. Thoughts arrive one at a time instead of colliding. Decisions feel lighter. You move through responsibilities with less friction because your mind is not carrying invisible weights. That is the kind of mental space that does not depend on escape. You do not need to hide. You can carry it everywhere. Creating space without isolation also reshapes your relationship to the world. You are present without being overwhelmed. You engage fully without losing yourself. You stop reacting automatically because your mind is no longer scattered. And you start responding intentionally because there is room to think. Space becomes part of your life, not something you have to run away to find. The most important thing to remember is that mental space is a practice, not a destination. Your mind will crowd itself again if you let it, but with consistent attention, small boundaries, and deliberate release, that space becomes your default. It is not about doing less. It is about thinking and acting with clarity while living fully. And once your brain learns that space is safe, that you can exist without holding everything at once, mental clarity stops being rare. It becomes a natural byproduct of how you move through the world, not a reward you chase by isolating yourself. Breaking the cycle of constant internal dialogue. Your mind never really stops talking. Even when you are sitting quietly, even when nothing is happening, there is an inner voice narrating, judging, planning, replaying. For most people, this internal dialogue feels like a companion, but it can also feel like a relentless critic, a chatter that never sleeps. And over time, that constant loop wears you down without you even realizing it. Most of us assume that thinking more will help. If I just analyze this enough, if I just plan one more scenario, if I just replay the conversation one more time. But overthinking is not productive thinking. It is a loop that tricks the brain into believing it is solving something, while actually keeping it trapped in the same patterns. The harder you push against it, the louder it gets. Here is the thing most people miss: you cannot silence your mind by force. Suppression does not work. Distracting yourself does not work long term. Every time you try to stop the thoughts, you are feeding the loop with attention and resistance. The mind responds with more chatter, more urgency, more noise. Trying to fight it creates friction, not freedom. Breaking the cycle is not about stopping the dialogue. It is about changing your relationship to it. That constant voice does not have to control you. Thoughts are events. They happen. They are not commands. The moment you see them as something passing, not something urgent, you open the first crack in the cycle. A powerful first step is observation. Notice the thoughts without judgment. Notice that your mind is repeating themes. The same worries. The same what-ifs. The same rehearsals. You do not need to act on them. You do not need to solve them right now. Simply noticing them shifts your role from participant to observer. That subtle shift is enormous. Another key is awareness of patterns. Most internal dialogue is triggered by stress, boredom, or emotional avoidance. When the body feels tense, the brain thinks it needs to plan or analyze. When emotions are suppressed, the mind spins stories to distract from the feeling. Recognizing triggers helps you respond differently. You can pause, breathe, and allow the thought to exist without feeding it energy. Breath and body awareness amplify this effect. Shallow chest breathing and muscle tension tell your brain that something needs urgent attention. Slowing the breath, relaxing the shoulders, feeling the body grounded in the present moment tells your nervous system it is safe. The inner voice naturally loses intensity when the body signals calm. Another technique is labeling thoughts, not analyzing, not judging, simply noting, thinking, or planning, or worrying. That labeling does something subtle but powerful. It creates distance. The thought is no longer you. It is something you notice, like a cloud passing in the sky. The mind starts to lose its sense of urgency. You may notice that emotions surface as the dialogue quiets. Anger, frustration, sadness, or fear may appear briefly. That is not a problem. That is release. The dialogue often exists to avoid these feelings. Once they are acknowledged, the mind no longer needs to spin stories to distract from them. Consistency is what makes this permanent. A single moment of observation does not require a lifetime of mental habits, but repeated practice. Pausing, noticing, breathing, labeling teaches your brain that thoughts are not emergencies. The loop weakens, chatter decreases, and internal tension eases. The validating truth is that your mind is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Constant internal dialogue is a survival mechanism, scanning for threats, predicting outcomes, rehearsing responses. It is not broken. It is overactive for a world that does not require constant vigilance. You are not failing. You are surviving. Breaking the cycle does not mean silence. It means freedom. Freedom to think without being controlled by thought. Freedom to act without reacting to every mental impulse. Freedom to allow thoughts to arise and pass without gripping them. That is where clarity starts to emerge naturally. Once the loop loosens, something remarkable happens. Thoughts no longer feel urgent. Decisions come more easily. Your mind feels spacious instead of crowded. Presence becomes effortless because you are no longer tangled in your own narrative. And in that space, clarity is not chased. It arrives. Breaking the cycle of internal dialogue is not about removing thought. It is about stopping the mind from running on autopilot. It is about noticing, allowing, and releasing. And once that happens, the constant chatter that once drained you becomes background noise instead of the center of your life. Using visualization to organize scattered thoughts. When your mind feels scattered, it is not lazy, it is cluttered. Thoughts are everywhere at once. Tasks, worries, ideas, memories, jostling for attention. You try to prioritize, make a plan, or simply focus, but it feels impossible. That is where visualization comes in, not the vague kind people talk about in self-help articles. A practical, intentional way to see your thoughts outside your head, so your brain stops spinning in circles. Most people underestimate how powerful externalizing your thoughts can be. Writing things down is one thing, but visualization turns intangible mental chaos into something tangible you can interact with. Your brain can see patterns it could not notice before. Connections form. Priorities emerge. Overwhelm shrinks. Here is the shift many miss. Your mind treats what you visualize as real. When you place your scattered thoughts into a clear structure, your brain relaxes. It stops holding everything at once. Suddenly, ideas do not compete for space anymore. They exist where they belong, and the mental load lightens. A simple method is mapping. Take a piece of paper or a digital tool and write your central concern in the middle. Then branch out everything related to it. Tasks, worries, ideas, emotions. Seeing how thoughts relate externally does two things. 1, it gives your brain the relief of offloading. 2, it creates perspective. Suddenly, what seemed urgent is no longer pressing. What seemed disconnected now makes sense in context. Visualization also works in layers. Some thoughts are immediate actions. Some are ongoing projects. Some are ideas or dreams that do not require action today. Color coding or spatial arrangement helps your mind assign importance naturally. You are not forcing clarity. You are showing it, and your brain loves clear visual cues. Another approach is mental movies. Instead of just thinking about what you need to do, imagine it unfolding on a timeline. See yourself completing one task after another. Notice the steps, the flow, the transitions. Visualization of process reduces uncertainty and tension. Your brain stops running hypothetical scenarios because you already have a clear map. The power of this technique is subtle but profound. When your thoughts are scattered, your brain is stuck in simulation mode. It is endlessly replaying problems, predicting outcomes, evaluating options. Visualization interrupts the simulation by creating a structure outside the mind. Once the pattern exists externally, the brain no longer needs to run loops internally. Emotion also benefits. Worries and anxieties lose intensity when placed visually. You see them as objects, not threats. This perspective softens the emotional weight attached to each thought. Clarity is not just mental, it is emotional. Your mind becomes lighter because it is no longer carrying invisible pressure. The validating truth is this: visualization is not about controlling every detail. It is about creating a playground for the mind. You are showing your thoughts where they belong, not trying to manipulate them. You do not need perfect diagrams or artistic skill. Even a rough sketch works because it signals order to the brain. Over time, this becomes a habit. Whenever your thoughts start to scatter, you naturally reach for visualization. The process itself trains your mind to pause, observe, and arrange. Instead of reacting impulsively to every mental ping, clarity becomes easier, more automatic, and less effortful. Visualization is also portable. You can do it with pen and paper, sticky notes, a whiteboard, or even mentally if needed. The principle is the same: externalize, organize, and give your brain something it can understand at a glance. Your mind can finally rest from juggling everything internally. When you practice this consistently, mental chaos transforms. Thoughts arrive with clarity instead of collision. Tasks become manageable. Emotions lose hidden weight. The mind feels spacious, not crowded. Presence becomes easier because you are no longer entangled in internal noise. The real magic is that this clarity does not come from more discipline, harder focus, or brute force. It comes from creating structure where your brain craved it. Visualization does the heavy lifting, and your mind responds with ease. By giving form to scattered thoughts, you give yourself the gift of mental space. And once that space exists, focus, creativity, and calm are no longer rare. They are natural byproducts of a mind that finally knows where everything belongs. Resetting emotional clutter for clear thinking. The emotions are supposed to guide us. They are meant to signal what matters, what feels good, what needs attention. But when they pile up without processing, they stop being signals and start being clutter. You carry frustration from yesterday, anxiety about tomorrow, and leftover tension from moments you barely noticed. That invisible weight clouds your thinking, makes decisions harder, and makes your mind feel noisy, even when nothing is happening externally. Most people try to ignore emotional clutter. They distract themselves with work, scrolling, or noise, hoping the feelings will fade. Sometimes it works temporarily, but usually emotions linger quietly in the body and mind, influencing thoughts, reactions, and energy without permission. That is why you might feel exhausted or irritable without knowing why. Here is the shift that changes everything. Emotional clutter cannot be solved by thinking harder. Logic cannot erase unresolved feelings. Clarity does not emerge from pushing feelings aside. Resetting emotional clutter begins with acknowledgement, not analyzing, not fixing, just noticing what is there. Start by simply naming the feeling: frustration, sadness, anxiety, relief, anger. You do not need to justify it. You do not need to act on it immediately. Naming is powerful because it interrupts the automatic loop. Your mind often amplifies emotion by silently arguing with it. Why should I feel this? Or what does this mean? Labeling breaks that feedback loop. The body is a critical part of this process. Emotional clutter is not just in your head. It lives in your shoulders, your jaw, your chest, your gut. When you are tense, your brain interprets that as something unresolved. Releasing stored tension physically, through deep breathing, gentle stretching, or even shaking it out, sends the nervous system a signal that it is safe to let go. Thoughts follow the body. Another technique is intentional expression. Sometimes a few sentences in a journal, a conversation with someone you trust, or even speaking aloud to yourself helps. Expression is not about problem solving. It is about moving the energy out of your system. Emotional clutter diminishes when it is allowed to flow instead of being trapped. Visualization can also help. Imagine the emotion as a cloud or object you can move, observe, or release. Picture it leaving your mind, dissolving, or settling somewhere neutral. Your brain responds to imagery in ways that words often cannot. By giving form to what is internal, you create distance and reduce intensity. Awareness of triggers is equally important. Emotional clutter often builds because old patterns keep repeating. A minor comment, a past memory, a habitual expectation. These activate the same emotional loops. Recognizing these triggers prevents them from hijacking your thinking repeatedly. You begin to notice early signs of emotional clutter before it accumulates. The validating truth is that carrying emotions is not a flaw. It is a human experience. You adapted to manage feelings in environments that did not allow full processing. The mind and body simply learned to store them. Resetting emotional clutter is not about rejecting yourself. It is about reclaiming space you did not realize was taken. When you practice these strategies consistently, clarity emerges naturally. Thoughts arrive with less interference. Decisions feel lighter. Your energy is more available for the present instead of tied to old, unresolved experiences. Emotional clarity becomes mental clarity because the two are deeply connected. This process does not require long hours or dramatic rituals. Even brief daily practices, pausing to notice feelings, taking a deep breath, moving tension in the body, writing a few lines, accumulate. The mind begins to operate in a cleaner space, free from the background chatter of unresolved emotions. Resetting emotional clutter is not about eliminating feelings. It is about letting them move through so they no longer dominate attention. The moment you allow this flow, your mind can finally think clearly without interference. You do not need to suppress, push, or escape. You just need to create space for natural resolution. Once emotional clutter is reset, everything changes subtly but profoundly. Thoughts slow enough to follow. Decisions feel grounded. Creativity emerges. Presence is easier. The mental fog lifts not because life changed, but because you allowed your internal world to reset. And that is the core of emotional clarity. When feelings are processed, released, and acknowledged, your mind becomes naturally organized. Clarity is no longer a goal you chase. It becomes the natural state of a system that finally has room to breathe. Why mental clarity feels uncomfortable at first. Mental clarity is not always what it seems. When people finally quiet their minds or create space to think, there is often a strange feeling that surfaces. Restlessness, tension, even mild anxiety. You expect peace, but instead it feels uncomfortable. And that confusion makes many people give up, thinking they are doing something wrong. The truth is, this discomfort is part of the process. It is not a sign that clarity failed. It is a signal that your mind is recalibrating. Most people never notice how much their mental habits rely on noise. Your brain has spent years juggling thoughts, worries, and obligations. That constant chatter feels normal because it is familiar. Even if it is exhausting, it is safe. When clarity begins, that safety net disappears. Suddenly, your mind has space it is not used to, and unfamiliar space can feel like emptiness, tension, or even boredom. Here is the key insight: discomfort does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means your system is adjusting. When mental clutter is removed, the brain notices all the subtle gaps it has been ignoring. The tension in your body, the unprocessed feelings, the thoughts you were avoiding. Clarity is uncomfortable at first because it exposes these things. Another reason clarity feels strange is expectation. You expect immediate peace. You expect focus, calm, or insight to appear as soon as the noise drops. But clarity is not an instant fix. It is a process of reorganizing patterns your brain has been running for years. That reorganization creates temporary instability. Thoughts slow, but awareness increases. You notice sensations, feelings, and tensions that were invisible in chaos. And that can feel unsettling. The body plays a huge role in this. Your nervous system has adapted to constant stimulation and mental busyness. When the noise stops, the body notices. You may feel restlessness in your chest, a buzzing in your mind, or tension in your shoulders. That is your system reminding you that it has been carrying more than necessary. Clarity simply highlights it. One of the most surprising aspects is that clarity can bring emotion to the surface. Frustration, sadness, or lingering anxiety may appear unexpectedly. When your mind is chaotic, these feelings are hidden under layers of thought. When mental clutter dissolves, emotions that were suppressed become noticeable. This is normal and necessary. Processing them is part of the reset. Another reason clarity feels uncomfortable is because it reveals indecision. When your mind slows down, you start noticing the choices you have been avoiding. Decisions that were buried under constant thought loops now require attention. The discomfort is not mental failure, it is the awareness of options and responsibility returning. The validating truth is that this phase is temporary. The discomfort is a signal that your system is adjusting to a new state. Your brain is learning that it can function without constant internal pressure. Once it adapts, clarity becomes natural. Thoughts arrive with ease. Decisions feel lighter. Focus is effortless. The initial tension fades, leaving mental calm that actually feels safe. Small practices help ease this transition. Pause instead of immediately reacting to new awareness. Breathe deeply and notice tension in your body. Label feelings that arise without judgment. Gentle movement or micro pauses during the day helps your system acclimate. These are not tricks. They are ways to reassure a nervous system that has been trained for constant alertness. The remarkable thing is that the mind learns quickly. Once it experiences clarity safely, it remembers how to maintain it. Future moments of stillness, focus, or calm become easier. The initial discomfort is always temporary. The reward is lasting. Clarity is uncomfortable at first because your brain is learning how to operate without chaos. It is readjusting from noise to calm. It is noticing things it has ignored for years. And when you allow that process to unfold instead of resisting it, mental clarity transitions from unfamiliar tension into natural ease. The magic of mental clarity is that the discomfort is a gateway. It signals that your mind is finally shedding what it no longer needs. Once you pass through it, focus, calm, and insight emerge effortlessly, not because you forced them, but because your system is finally ready to receive them. Learning to observe thoughts without judgment. Most people do not realize how quickly they judge their own thoughts. A worry appears and instantly you think, "Why am I like this?" A negative idea shows up and you label it as bad or wrong. Even positive thoughts get evaluated, questioned, or doubted. This happens so fast that it feels automatic, but that constant judgment is one of the biggest sources of mental tension you experience every day. Your mind is not just thinking. It is commenting on its own thoughts nonstop. That extra layer creates pressure. Instead of thoughts coming and going, they stick. They loop. They gain emotional weight. And the harder you try to control or correct them, the more exhausting it becomes. Here is the surprising truth. Thoughts are neutral events. They are not facts. They are not instructions. They are mental weather patterns that form based on memory, emotion, habit, and environment. When you judge them, you turn passing mental events into problems that feel personal. Observing thoughts without judgment does not mean approving of everything you think. It means stepping out of the reflex to react. The moment you stop arguing with your thoughts, something powerful happens. They lose intensity. The mind relaxes. Space opens up naturally. This is difficult at first because judgment feels like control. Many people believe that if they do not judge their thoughts, they will lose discipline or awareness. But judgment is not clarity, it is resistance, and resistance keeps the mind locked in tension. The practice starts with noticing. Simply notice when a thought appears, not what it means, not whether it is useful. Just notice that it is there. This tiny shift changes your role. You are no longer inside the thought. You are watching it. At first, you might notice how busy your mind really is. Thoughts stacking on top of thoughts. Stories forming instantly. This can feel overwhelming. But that awareness is not making things worse. It is revealing what was already happening unnoticed. Awareness is the beginning of freedom. Another important part is recognizing emotional reactions to thoughts. A single idea can trigger anxiety, guilt, or frustration. Instead of judging the thought, notice the emotion. Feel it in the body. Where does it sit? Chest, stomach, jaw. This grounds you in experience instead of analysis. When you observe without judgment, the nervous system calms. The brain no longer feels threatened by its own activity. Stress hormones decrease. The mind stops treating every thought as an emergency. This is not philosophical. It is biological. The body responds immediately to reduced internal conflict. You may notice thoughts repeating, the same worries, the same self-criticism. This repetition is not failure. It is habit. Habits weaken when they are seen clearly without reinforcement. Every time you notice a thought without feeding it judgment, you break the loop just a little. A helpful technique is labeling gently, not harshly, simply thinking, or planning, or remembering. This creates distance without suppression. The thought continues or fades on its own. You are not pushing it away. You are letting it pass. Over time, this practice changes your relationship with your mind. Thoughts become information instead of identity. You stop believing everything automatically. You stop fighting yourself internally. Mental energy returns because it is no longer wasted on self-conflict. The validating truth is that your mind is not broken. It learned judgment as a survival tool. In the past, evaluating thoughts quickly helped avoid danger. But in modern life, that same habit turns inward and creates constant pressure. Learning to observe without judgment is not weakness, it is an upgrade. As this becomes natural, something subtle shifts. Silence appears between thoughts, not forced silence. Natural gaps. Those gaps are clarity. They are rest. They are presence. You do not create them. You allow them by not interfering. This does not mean your mind goes blank. Thoughts still appear, but they feel lighter, less sticky, less personal. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of spiral. Learning to observe thoughts without judgment is one of the most freeing skills you can develop. It does not require changing your thoughts. It requires changing how you relate to them. And once that relationship softens, clarity is no longer something you chase. It becomes the natural state of a mind that is no longer fighting itself. Shifting from mental chaos to gentle awareness. Mental chaos rarely feels dramatic at first. It feels like restlessness, like too many tabs open in your head, like thinking about 5 things while trying to focus on one. Over time, that chaos becomes your normal. You stop questioning it. You just assume this is how your mind works. Busy, loud, unsettled, but it does not have to stay that way. Most people try to escape mental chaos by forcing calm. They push themselves to focus harder, meditate longer, or control their thoughts. That effort usually backfires. The mind resists pressure. The harder you grip, the more chaotic it becomes. What actually creates clarity is not force. It is gentleness. Gentle awareness is the opposite of mental chaos. Chaos is scattered attention, pulled in every direction. Gentle awareness is attention resting where it is, without judgment, without urgency. It does not demand silence. It allows what is already happening to be noticed calmly. The shift begins when you stop trying to fix your mind. The moment you decide that your thoughts are a problem, you create tension. That tension fuels more thinking. Instead, try this simple change. Notice what your mind is doing without labeling it as good or bad. Busy mind, planning mind, remembering mind. That observation alone begins to slow the chaos. At first, gentle awareness feels unfamiliar. You may notice how fast your thoughts jump, how quickly one idea turns into another. This can feel uncomfortable, even overwhelming, but awareness is not creating the chaos, it is revealing it. And once revealed, it can soften. Your body plays a huge role here. Mental chaos is often supported by physical tension, tight shoulders, shallow breathing, clenched jaw. When you soften the body, the mind follows. Take a slow breath. Let your shoulders drop. Feel the weight of your body where you are sitting. These physical cues tell your nervous system that it does not need to stay on high alert. Gentle awareness also means allowing thoughts to pass without engaging them. You do not need to follow every thought to the end. You do not need to solve everything immediately. A thought can appear and disappear like a sound in the background. When you stop chasing it, it loses momentum. Many people fear that if they stop engaging their thoughts, they will become passive or unproductive. The opposite happens. When awareness replaces chaos, your mind becomes clearer and more responsive. You act from intention instead of reaction. You choose what matters instead of responding to everything. Emotion often surfaces during this shift. When chaos quiets, feelings that were hidden under mental noise become noticeable. You might feel sadness, frustration, or relief. This is not regression. It is processing. Gentle awareness gives emotions space to move through instead of staying stuck beneath constant thinking. Another important part of this shift is patience. Your mind has been chaotic for a long time because it learned to survive that way. It will not change overnight. Gentle awareness works because it does not fight old habits. It allows them to fade naturally through non-resistance. Over time, you will notice subtle changes. Thoughts slow down. Gaps appear between them. You feel more present in simple moments. Walking, listening, breathing. These are not dramatic breakthroughs. They are quiet signs that your mind is reorganizing itself. The validating truth is this: mental chaos is not a personal failure. It is a nervous system that has been overstimulated and undersupported. Shifting to gentle awareness is not about discipline. It is about safety. When your system feels safe, it no longer needs to stay loud. As this becomes familiar, awareness starts to feel like home. You no longer feel the need to escape your mind. You can sit with it, notice it, let it be. And in that space, clarity emerges naturally, without effort, without force. Shifting from mental chaos to gentle awareness is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to a state your mind already knows, one where attention is calm, present, and kind. And once you experience that even briefly, you realize that clarity was never something you had to chase. It was always waiting for you to stop pushing and start noticing. How clarity improves decision-making instantly. Most people think better decisions come from more thinking, more analysis, more weighing pros and cons. But if you pay attention, the moments when you make your best decisions usually feel simple, clear, almost obvious. That is not because you suddenly became smarter. It is because your mind was clear enough to see what mattered. Mental clarity changes decision-making instantly because it removes noise. When your mind is cluttered, every choice feels heavy. Even small decisions feel draining. What should I do next? What if I choose wrong? What will this affect later? The brain tries to calculate everything at once, and that creates paralysis. Clarity does the opposite. It reduces options to what is relevant now, not everything, just what matters. When the mental fog lifts, priorities arrange themselves without force. You are no longer trying to decide from chaos. You are responding from understanding. Here is what happens neurologically. When stress and mental overload are high, the brain leans on survival patterns. Fight or flight thinking, rushed decisions, avoidance. Overthinking, the prefrontal cortex, which handles reasoning and judgment, gets crowded out. Clarity calms the nervous system, allowing that part of the brain to come back online. Decision-making improves not because you try harder, but because the right systems are finally in control. Another reason clarity improves decisions instantly is emotional separation. When your mind is cluttered, emotions hijack choices. Fear rushes you, guilt pushes you, anxiety demands certainty. Clarity creates space between emotion and action. You still feel emotions, but they no longer drive every choice. You can notice fear without obeying it. That alone changes everything. Clarity also sharpens intuition. Intuition is not random. It is pattern recognition built from experience. When your mind is noisy, intuition gets buried under overanalysis. When clarity appears, intuition becomes easier to hear. You feel a quiet sense of yes or no instead of a storm of arguments. You may notice that decisions made in clarity feel calm, even when they are difficult. That calm is not indifference. It is alignment. You are not fighting yourself internally. You see the trade-offs clearly and accept them. There is no mental tug of war. One powerful shift clarity brings is speed without recklessness. You decide faster, not because you rush, but because unnecessary variables drop away. You stop asking questions that do not matter. You stop anticipating outcomes you cannot control. The mind focuses on the next right step instead of the entire staircase. Another overlooked benefit is confidence. Clarity does not guarantee perfect outcomes, but it gives you confidence in your process. You trust yourself because the decision came from a clear place, not from panic or pressure. Even if things do not go exactly as planned, there is less regret because you know you chose well with the information you had. The validating truth is that indecision is rarely about lack of intelligence. It is about lack of clarity. When the mind is overloaded, even the smartest people struggle to choose. When clarity returns, decision-making becomes almost automatic. You do not need hours of meditation or complete silence for this effect. Even brief moments of clarity can shift decisions instantly. A deep breath, a pause, letting go of mental clutter for a moment, that is often enough for the answer to surface. Over time, repeated clarity trains your brain. You begin to recognize when you are deciding from noise versus clarity. You learn to pause instead of pushing forward blindly. Decisions stop feeling like battles and start feeling like responses. Clarity also reduces decision fatigue. Because you are not overthinking every choice, you conserve mental energy. This compounds throughout the day. Fewer regrets, fewer second guesses, more trust in yourself. The most important thing to understand is that clarity does not give you more information. It gives you better access to what you already know. It organizes your thoughts so insight can rise naturally. When your mind is clear, decisions stop being heavy. They feel lighter, cleaner, more grounded. Not because life got easier, but because your internal environment did. And that shift happens instantly the moment clarity replaces noise. That is the power of mental clarity. It does not just calm the mind. It changes how you move through life, one decision at a time. The link between emotional calm and mental sharpness. Most people think mental sharpness comes from thinking faster or harder, being quick, being alert, being constantly on. But if you look closely, the sharpest moments of thinking usually happen when you feel calm, when your emotions are steady, when your body is not tense. That connection is not coincidence. Emotional calm and mental sharpness are deeply linked. When emotions are unsettled, your mind fragments. Anxiety pulls attention into the future. Anger locks it into the past. Fear narrows your focus until all you can see is threat. Even excitement can scatter attention if it becomes overstimulation. In these states, the brain is busy reacting instead of thinking clearly. Emotional calm creates the opposite effect. It widens attention. It stabilizes focus. It allows the mind to process information without distortion. This is why moments of calm often bring insight. You suddenly see solutions that felt impossible minutes before. Nothing external changed. Your internal state did. There is a biological reason for this. When emotions are intense, the nervous system shifts into survival mode. Stress hormones rise. Blood flow prioritizes fast reactions over thoughtful analysis. This is useful if you are in danger. It is not useful for decision-making, creativity, or complex thinking. Emotional calm signals safety. When the brain receives that signal, higher cognitive functions come back online. Mental sharpness depends on this balance. You cannot think clearly when your system feels threatened, even by internal stress. Calm does not dull the mind. It sharpens it by removing interference, like cleaning a lens instead of trying to see harder. Many people misunderstand this and try to push through emotional turbulence. They tell themselves to focus, to power through, to ignore feelings. That effort often makes things worse. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They leak into thinking as distraction, irritability, or mental fatigue. Emotional calm is not emotional numbness. It is the ability to feel without being overwhelmed. You still experience emotions, but they move through instead of hijacking attention. This fluidity frees mental energy. The mind no longer needs to manage internal chaos and can focus outward with clarity. One reason calm improves sharpness instantly is reduced mental load. When emotions settle, the brain stops multitasking internally. There is no longer a background process running worry or frustration. That freed capacity becomes available for focus, memory, and problem solving. You may notice this during simple moments. After a deep breath, after a walk, after a moment of acceptance. Suddenly your thoughts feel cleaner. Words come easier. Decisions feel simpler. That is emotional calm sharpening cognition in real time. Another overlooked aspect is self-trust. When emotions are regulated, you trust your perceptions more. You second-guess less. Doubt often comes from emotional instability, not lack of intelligence. Calm restores confidence because your internal signals feel reliable again. The validating truth is that emotional calm is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not disengagement. It is an optimal state for the brain. High performers across disciplines enter calm states before peak performance because the mind functions best there. This does not require perfect emotional control. Even small reductions in emotional reactivity improve sharpness. Noticing tension, slowing the breath, allowing a feeling without resisting it. These actions tell the nervous system it can relax. Mental clarity follows naturally. Over time, this link becomes more obvious. You start to recognize that when your thinking feels foggy, it is often emotional clutter asking for attention. Address the emotion and the mind clears. Not through force, but through alignment. As emotional calm becomes familiar, mental sharpness becomes consistent. Focus lasts longer. Insight appears more often. Learning feels easier. You are not smarter. You are clearer. And clarity is what allows intelligence to express itself fully. The most powerful realization is this: you do not sharpen the mind by pushing it. You sharpen it by settling the emotional environment it lives in. When emotions are calm, the mind does not have to defend itself. It can observe, analyze, and respond with precision. That is the true link between emotional calm and mental sharpness. Calm is not the absence of intensity. It is the absence of internal conflict. And in that state, the mind does what it was always meant to do: think clearly, respond wisely, and move through life with quiet confidence. Reconnecting with your inner sense of direction. At some point, many people realize they feel lost without knowing why. Not dramatically lost, just subtly off. Decisions feel harder. Motivation fades. You stay busy, yet nothing feels quite aligned. That feeling is not a lack of ambition or discipline. It is disconnection from your inner sense of direction. Your inner direction is not a loud voice telling you what to do. It is quieter than that. It shows up as a sense of rightness or resistance, a pull towards something, or a subtle no in your body. When your mind is cluttered and emotionally overloaded, that signal gets drowned out. You keep moving, but without a clear compass. Modern life trains you to look outward for direction, goals, expectations, metrics, opinions. Over time, you stop checking in with yourself. You rely on what you should want instead of what actually fits. The more external noise you absorb, the harder it becomes to hear your own internal guidance. Reconnecting with your inner direction begins with slowing down enough to notice it exists. This does not require a life overhaul. It requires pauses. Moments where you ask yourself simple questions and actually listen. How does this feel? Does this expand me or drain me? Am I moving from pressure or from clarity? The body plays a key role here. Your inner direction often communicates physically before mentally. A sense of ease, a tightening in the chest, a subtle excitement, a heaviness. These sensations are not random. They are information. When you ignore them repeatedly, your sense of direction fades into the background. Mental clarity brings this compass back online. When the noise quiets, signals become easier to detect. You start to notice patterns. Which activities energize you? Which conversations leave you drained? Which decisions bring relief instead of tension? Direction emerges through contrast, not analysis. Another reason people lose direction is emotional backlog. Unprocessed emotions cloud perception. Fear disguises itself as logic. Guilt disguises itself as responsibility. Anxiety disguises itself as urgency. Until these emotions are acknowledged, your inner direction feels unreliable. Clearing emotional clutter restores trust in your internal signals. One powerful way to reconnect is through values, not goals. Goals change. Circumstances shift. Values remain. Ask yourself what matters underneath the outcomes. Freedom, stability, growth, connection, contribution. When your actions align with values, direction feels steady even when the path is unclear. You may notice resistance when reconnecting with this inner compass. That resistance often comes from fear of change. Following your true direction may require letting go of expectations or identities you have outgrown. This discomfort is not a warning sign. It is part of realignment. The validating truth is that you never truly lose your inner direction. You just stop listening to it. It is always there, waiting for space. The moment you begin paying attention again, it responds quickly, Clarity does not arrive all at once. It unfolds step by step, decision by decision. As this connection strengthens, choices feel simpler. Not because they are easier, but because you trust yourself more. You stop second-guessing every move. You recognize when something is not for you without needing justification. Direction becomes felt rather than forced. You do not need certainty to move forward. Direction is not a detailed map. It is a sense of orientation, like knowing which way is north even if you cannot see the destination yet. That sense alone reduces anxiety and restores confidence. Over time, reconnecting with your inner direction changes how you move through life. You waste less energy proving, pleasing, or pushing. You respond instead of react. You feel grounded even in uncertainty because you are guided from within rather than pulled from outside. Reconnecting with your inner sense of direction is not about finding a perfect answer. It is about restoring a relationship with yourself, a relationship built on listening, trust, and clarity. And once that relationship is active again, decisions stop feeling random. Life stops feeling scattered. Direction returns quietly, naturally, not as a command, but as a knowing. And when you follow it, even imperfectly, life begins to feel coherent again. Not because everything is clear, but because you are aligned. And that alignment is the clearest direction there is. Releasing mental control to gain mental freedom. Most people believe control equals safety. If I think enough, plan enough, manage every outcome, I will be okay. That belief becomes the foundation of how the mind operates. Constant monitoring, constant adjusting, constant effort to stay ahead of uncertainty. Over time, that mental grip tightens so much that it becomes exhausting. What you call control slowly turns into confinement. Mental control feels productive on the surface. You replay conversations to get them right. You plan every scenario to avoid mistakes. You monitor your thoughts so nothing negative slips through. But underneath, the mind never rests. It is always on guard, always bracing, and that constant vigilance drains clarity, creativity, and peace. Here is the paradox most people miss. The more you try to control your mind, the less freedom you experience. Control creates resistance. Resistance creates tension. And tension keeps the mind locked in loops. True mental freedom does not come from managing every thought. It comes from loosening your grip on them. Letting go of control does not mean becoming careless or passive. It means recognizing that not every thought needs supervision. Thoughts arise on their own. Many are random. Some are outdated. Some are emotional echoes. Trying to filter or fix each one keeps you trapped in reaction mode. One of the clearest signs of excessive mental control is urgency. The feeling that you must resolve a thought immediately. That if you do not think it through now, something bad will happen. That urgency is not wisdom. It is anxiety disguised as responsibility. When you notice urgency, it is often a cue to soften, not tighten. The body reveals this pattern clearly. Mental control shows up physically as tension, tight jaw, raised shoulders, shallow breathing. The body mirrors the mind gripping for certainty. When you consciously relax the body, you send a signal that control is not needed in this moment. The mind follows more quickly than you expect. Releasing control begins with allowing uncertainty to exist without filling it. Instead of answering every question your mind asks, try leaving some unanswered. Not forever, just for now. This creates space. The mind learns that it can function without constant resolution. That lesson alone is freeing. Another powerful shift is trusting awareness instead of control. Awareness notices what is happening without trying to change it. When you watch your thoughts come and go, you realize something important. Most thoughts resolve themselves if you do not interfere. They rise, peak, and fade naturally. Control interrupts that process. You may notice fear arise when you loosen control, fear of losing direction, fear of missing something important, fear of things falling apart. This fear is understandable. Control once protected you, but protection is not the same as freedom. You can thank the habit of control without letting it run your life anymore. The validating truth is that your mind learned control to survive. It was adaptive, useful, necessary at one point, but survival mode is not meant to be permanent. Releasing control is not undoing progress. It is updating your system for a safer, more stable present. As control softens, something subtle shifts. Thoughts slow down. Decision-making becomes easier. You stop micromanaging yourself internally. There is less internal commentary, more space, more presence. You are still engaged with life, but without the constant pressure to manage every detail. Mental freedom feels different than you expect. It is not empty or numb. It is spacious, flexible, responsive. You can think when needed and rest when not. You can feel emotions without being overwhelmed by them. You are no longer fighting your own mind. Over time, releasing control builds trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your ability to respond rather than predict. Trust that clarity emerges when space is allowed. This trust is what creates real confidence. Not certainty about outcomes, but confidence in your capacity to meet them. The most powerful realization is this: you do not gain freedom by controlling the mind, you gain it by no longer needing to. When effort drops away, intelligence expresses itself naturally. Insight appears without force. Calm arrives without command. Releasing mental control is not about doing less. It is about interfering less. And in that non-interference, your mind discovers what it feels like to move freely again. Not pushed, not restrained, just present, clear, and capable. That is mental freedom. Not something you achieve by tightening your grip, but something that reveals itself the moment you finally let go. The difference between focused mind and quiet mind. Most people think a focused mind and a quiet mind are the same thing. If the mind is quiet, it must be focused. If it is focused, it must be quiet. But they are not the same state, and confusing them often creates frustration. You try to force silence when what you actually need is direction, or you push for focus when what your mind really needs is rest. A focused mind is engaged. It is oriented toward something, a task, a thought, a moment. Attention is narrowed intentionally. The noise fades not because it is suppressed, but because it is irrelevant. Focus is selective. It chooses one thing and lets the rest fall away naturally. A quiet mind is different. It is not pointed anywhere in particular. It is open, spacious. Thoughts may still appear, but there is no urgency around them. Nothing needs to be solved. Nothing needs to be held. The mind is resting in awareness rather than aiming at a target. Problems arise when you expect one state to behave like the other. When your mind is noisy, you may try to force quiet, but if there is unresolved tension, that effort just creates more resistance. On the other hand, when you need focus, you may try to relax too much, which leaves the mind drifting instead of engaged. Understanding the difference changes how you approach clarity. A focused mind often feels energized. There is momentum. Time passes quickly. You feel absorbed. This state uses mental resources efficiently, but it still uses them. It is active clarity. You would not want to stay here all day without rest. A quiet mind feels settling, grounded, neutral. There is less sense of time, less internal commentary. This state restores mental energy. It resets the nervous system. It is where integration happens, even if it does not feel productive. Many people struggle because they live in neither state. Instead, they hover in mental noise, not focused enough to engage fully, not quiet enough to rest, just constantly stimulated and internally busy. That in-between state is what drains you. Here is something important. You do not achieve a quiet mind by forcing focus, and you do not achieve focus by demanding silence. Each state has its own doorway. Focus emerges when you remove distraction and give the mind a clear purpose. One task, one intention, one moment. The mind naturally organizes itself around relevance. You do not need to silence thoughts. You just need to give attention something meaningful to rest on. Quiet emerges when you remove pressure. No goals, no outcome. No need to improve or fix. The mind settles when it realizes there is nothing required of it right now. This is why stillness can feel uncomfortable at first. The mind is used to being useful. Quiet asks it to simply be. The validating truth is that both states are healthy and necessary. A focused mind helps you act effectively. A quiet mind helps you recover and recalibrate. Problems arise when you expect one to replace the other. Another key difference is how thoughts behave. In focus, thoughts line up behind the task. In quiet, thoughts drift in and out without forming lines at all. Neither is better. They serve different purposes. You may notice that after a period of quiet, focus improves dramatically. That is because the mind has released excess noise. And after deep focus, quiet often feels richer and deeper because the mind has expressed itself fully. Learning to recognize which state you need is a powerful skill. If you are scattered and restless, forcing focus may help. If you are tense and mentally fatigued, quiet is the medicine. Clarity comes from choosing the right state, not forcing the wrong one. Over time, your relationship with your mind changes. You stop trying to make it silent all the time. You stop demanding constant productivity. You allow natural rhythms, engagement and rest, focus and quiet. The most freeing realization is this: mental clarity does not mean silence. It means appropriateness. The right mental state for the moment you are in. When you understand the difference between a focused mind and a quiet mind, you stop fighting yourself. You stop chasing an ideal that does not fit the situation. And instead, you begin working with your mind instead of against it. That cooperation creates ease. Decisions become simpler. Attention feels cleaner. Rest actually restores you. And clarity stops being something you force and starts being something you allow, moment by moment, depending on what is truly needed. Creating a sustainable clarity practice beyond the session. Mental clarity often feels easiest in a dedicated moment, during a session, a quiet pause, a focused practice. But the real challenge is not reaching clarity. It is sustaining it once life starts moving again. Emails return, conversations resume, responsibilities pile up. Without a foundation, clarity fades and the mind slips back into old habits. That is not failure. It is simply how the brain works without structure. A sustainable clarity practice is not about repeating one perfect routine every day. It is about integrating clarity into how you live, think, and respond. It becomes less of an activity and more of a way of relating to your mind. The biggest mistake people make is treating clarity like a temporary state they need to re-enter from scratch each time. That creates pressure. When clarity is framed as something fragile, you constantly worry about losing it. Sustainable clarity comes from knowing you can return to it anytime with small, reliable cues. One of the most effective ways to do this is anchoring. Choose simple anchors that remind your nervous system what clarity feels like. A slow breath, relaxing the shoulders, feeling your feet on the ground. These are not techniques you save for special moments. They are signals you use throughout the day to reset your internal state. Consistency matters more than duration. 5 seconds of awareness practiced often does more than one long session practiced rarely. Each time you pause, notice, and soften, you reinforce a neural pattern. The brain learns that clarity is accessible, not rare. Another key is reducing friction, not adding tasks. A sustainable practice fits into your life as it already exists. Waiting in line, walking to another room, before opening a message. These moments are already there. You are simply using them differently. Clarity grows in the spaces between actions, not just in formal practice. Letting go of perfection is essential. Some days your mind will feel clear. Other days it will feel busy or heavy. A sustainable practice does not demand the same outcome every time. It values showing up over achieving a specific state. This flexibility prevents burnout and resistance. You also need permission to reset repeatedly. Mental clarity is not something you set once and maintain forever. Life constantly introduces new inputs. A sustainable approach expects disruption and builds in return points. Every reset strengthens trust in your ability to recover clarity without effort. Another overlooked aspect is emotional hygiene. Unprocessed emotions quietly erode clarity over time. A sustainable practice includes regular check-ins. What am I feeling right now? What tension am I holding? Naming and acknowledging emotions prevents buildup. This keeps the mind cleaner without needing major interventions. Clarity also deepens when you align actions with values. When you consistently act against what matters to you, mental friction builds. When actions reflect values, the mind settles naturally. Sustainability is easier when clarity is supported by how you live, not just how you think. The validating truth is this: you do not need to protect clarity from life. Clarity is not destroyed by activity, it is disrupted by unconsciousness. The moment you bring awareness back, even briefly, clarity returns. That is why sustainable practices focus on reminders, not routines. Over time, this changes your relationship with clarity. You stop chasing it. You stop worrying about losing it. You trust that it is available whenever you slow down and notice. That trust alone keeps the mind calmer. Eventually, clarity becomes your baseline. Not because your life is quieter, but because your responses are cleaner. You recover faster from stress. You notice overload earlier. You make small adjustments instead of waiting for collapse. A sustainable clarity practice is not about discipline or willpower. It is about kindness and repetition. Gentle reminders woven into daily life. Simple resets used often. Awareness returning again and again without judgment. And that is how clarity lasts beyond the session. Not by holding on to a perfect state, but by building a relationship with your mind that knows how to return to balance naturally. Clarity stops being an event and becomes a rhythm. One you can trust, no matter what the day brings. Protecting your mental space after gaining clarity, the clarity changes how you see everything. Once your mind settles, you notice how noisy it was before, how reactive, how crowded, and that awareness is powerful. But it also creates a new challenge. How do you protect this clarity once you have it, without becoming rigid, guarded, or withdrawn from life? The first thing to understand is that mental space is fragile only when you treat it like something you might lose forever. Clarity is not a glass object that shatters the moment life gets loud. It is a state your mind can return to. Protecting it is not about defense. It is about awareness and boundaries. Most mental space gets invaded quietly, not through major stress but through small leaks. One unnecessary conversation, one habit of overchecking, one moment of saying yes when your body said no. These seem harmless, but they accumulate. Protecting clarity means noticing these leaks early instead of waiting until you feel overwhelmed again. One of the most important boundaries is attention. Attention is currency. Whatever you give it to grows louder in your mind. Protecting mental space means being selective about where your attention goes. Not everything deserves your focus. Not every thought needs engagement. Not every external demand requires immediate response. This does not mean disengaging from life. It means responding intentionally instead of reflexively. When something pulls at your attention, pause for a moment. Ask yourself if this matters right now. That pause alone prevents mental clutter from rebuilding. Another key is emotional boundaries. Other people's stress, urgency, and expectations can easily spill into your mental space if you are not aware. Protecting clarity means noticing when you are absorbing emotions that are not yours to carry. You can care without carrying. You can listen without internalizing. The body plays a critical role here. Mental space collapses quickly when the body is tense and exhausted. Protecting clarity includes protecting your energy, adequate rest, movement, breathing. These are not luxuries, they are maintenance. When the body is regulated, the mind is far less vulnerable to overload. You also need boundaries with yourself. This is often overlooked. Old habits return subtly. Overthinking, self-criticism, replaying conversations. Protecting mental space means catching these patterns early and choosing not to feed them, not with force, with awareness. You notice the habit and gently disengage. Technology is another major factor. Constant input fragments clarity faster than almost anything else. Protecting your mental space does not require eliminating technology. It requires conscious use, fewer automatic checks, more intentional engagement, space between inputs. Your mind needs room to integrate what it receives. The validating truth is that protecting clarity is not about control. It is about respect. Respect for your nervous system. Respect for your limits. Respect for the state you work to access. When you respect clarity, you naturally make choices that support it. You may notice fear arise around protecting mental space. Fear of missing out. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of slowing down. These fears are normal. They come from old survival patterns. But clarity teaches you something important. When your mind is clear, you respond better, not worse. You are more present, not less available. Over time, protecting mental space becomes intuitive. You feel when something is draining you unnecessarily. You sense when a boundary is needed. You adjust before overload sets in. This is not rigidity, it is intelligence. Clarity also teaches discernment. You realize that not everything that feels urgent is important. Not everything that demands attention deserves it. That discernment is what keeps mental space clean long term. Most importantly, protecting clarity includes allowing disruption without panic. Your mind will get noisy again sometimes. That is life. Protection does not mean preventing noise. It means knowing how to return to clarity without struggle. Trust replaces fear. When mental space is protected, clarity deepens. Focus lasts longer. Emotional reactions soften faster. You feel grounded even when things are busy, not because the world changed, but because your internal boundaries did. Protecting your mental space is not about building walls. It is about building awareness. Awareness of what you allow in. Awareness of what you release. Awareness of when to pause. With that awareness, clarity becomes resilient. And once clarity is resilient, you stop guarding it anxiously. You live freely, knowing that no matter what comes and goes, your mind knows how to find its way back to space, calm, and balance. Integrating clarity into work and daily tasks, where clarity often feels easiest when nothing is required of you. When you are resting, reflecting, sitting quietly. But real life does not happen in stillness. It happens in emails, meetings, errands, conversations, deadlines, and small responsibilities stacked back to back. The real skill is not finding clarity away from life. It is bringing clarity into motion. Most people assume work and daily tasks destroy clarity, that productivity and mental calm are opposites. But the truth is, chaos usually comes from how you engage with tasks, not the tasks themselves. When your attention is scattered, even simple work feels overwhelming. When clarity is present, the same tasks feel manageable. Integration starts with intention. Before beginning any task, pause briefly and orient yourself. What am I doing right now? Why does it matter? What is the next small step? This takes seconds, but it organizes the mind immediately. Instead of reacting, you enter the task deliberately. One of the biggest drains on clarity at work is multitasking. Switching between tasks feels efficient, but it fragments attention. Each switch leaves mental residue. Thoughts from the previous task linger, pulling focus away. Clarity returns when you give yourself permission to do one thing at a time. Even briefly. Even imperfectly. Another shift is redefining productivity. Productivity is not speed. It is alignment. When your mind is clear, you work at a sustainable pace. You make fewer mistakes. You second-guess less. You spend less energy recovering from distraction. This actually saves time, even if it feels slower at first. Daily tasks offer constant opportunities for micro-clarity. Walking to another room, washing dishes, opening your computer. These transitions are usually rushed, but when you slow them slightly, they become resets. Feel your breath. Notice your body. Let the previous task finish mentally before starting the next. This prevents accumulation of mental clutter. Clarity at work also depends on boundaries around attention. Not every message needs immediate response. Not every thought needs immediate action. When something arises, ask yourself if it belongs now or later. Creating clear containers for tasks reduces the background noise of everything competing at once. Emotional awareness is equally important. Work often triggers subtle emotions: pressure, frustration, self-doubt. These emotions cloud thinking if ignored. Acknowledging them quietly prevents them from leaking into decisions and reactions. You do not need to fix the emotion. Just noticing it restores clarity. Another powerful integration tool is rhythm. The mind works best in cycles of engagement and release. Short breaks, pauses between meetings, moments of stillness after intense focus. These are not indulgences, they are maintenance. Without them, clarity erodes and effort increases. The validating truth is this: clarity is not fragile. It does not disappear because you are busy. It disappears when you stop noticing yourself. Integration means staying aware even while doing. Presence does not require stopping. It requires remembering. Over time, this approach transforms work. Tasks feel lighter. You feel less rushed even when deadlines exist. Decisions become cleaner. Communication improves because you are responding instead of reacting. The same workload feels different because your internal state is different. You may notice resistance at first. Slowing down even slightly can feel uncomfortable, like you are falling behind. But that discomfort passes quickly. What remains is steadiness, a sense of being grounded while moving forward. Integrating clarity into daily tasks also reduces end-of-day exhaustion. You are no longer carrying unfinished mental threads from task to task. When work ends, your mind can rest because it is not overloaded with unresolved attention. This integration does not require perfection. Some days will be scattered. That is normal. What matters is returning. Each time you pause and reset, you strengthen the habit. Clarity becomes easier to access, even in complex environments. Eventually, clarity stops being something you schedule. It becomes how you operate. You work with your mind instead of pushing it. You respect its limits and use its strengths. Focus becomes natural. Presence becomes familiar. Integrating clarity into work and daily tasks is not about doing less. It is about doing what you are already doing with awareness. And when awareness leads, even the busiest days feel grounded, intentional, and mentally spacious. Using mental pauses to prevent overwhelm. While overwhelm rarely comes from doing too much all at once, it comes from never stopping. From moving from one thought to the next, one task to the next, without giving the mind a chance to reset. Most people wait until they feel exhausted before they pause, but by then the system is already overloaded. Mental pauses are not recovery tools, they are prevention. A mental pause is not stepping away from life. It is a brief moment where attention stops chasing and starts settling. No problem solving, no planning, just a short interruption in the constant forward motion of the mind. These pauses are small, but they change everything. The brain is designed to work in cycles: focus and release, engagement and rest. When those cycles are ignored, the nervous system stays in a low-level state of stress. Cortisol remains elevated. Attention fragments. Thoughts race faster, not because there is more to do, but because the brain has not been given a moment to integrate. Mental pauses interrupt this pattern before overwhelm builds. Even a few seconds can signal safety to the nervous system. That signal allows the mind to organize itself again. Most people think pauses have to be long to be effective. They imagine meditation, silence, or stepping away completely. But the most sustainable pauses are brief and frequent. A slow breath before responding. Feeling the weight of your body in a chair. Letting your eyes soften for a moment before starting something new. These pauses fit into life instead of competing with it. One reason overwhelm sneaks up on people is that it builds invisibly. Thoughts pile up. Emotions remain unprocessed. Decisions linger in the background. Without pauses, the mind never clears its cache. It just keeps adding more. Mental pauses create space for release without effort. There is also a psychological shift that happens. When you pause intentionally, you move from reactive mode into choice. Instead of automatically doing the next thing, you check in. Is this necessary right now? Can this wait? That moment of awareness reduces pressure instantly. Another important function of mental pauses is emotional regulation. Stressful moments trigger emotional responses before conscious thought catches up. Pausing creates a gap between stimulus and reaction. In that gap, clarity returns. You respond more calmly. You say less that you later regret. You conserve mental energy. The validating truth is that you do not pause because you are overwhelmed. You pause so you do not become overwhelmed. This reframing removes guilt. Pauses are not signs of weakness or inefficiency. They are signs of intelligence and self-awareness. At first, pausing can feel uncomfortable. The mind is used to movement. When it stops briefly, unfinished thoughts surface. Tension becomes noticeable. This does not mean the pause is failing. It means it is working. You are finally noticing what was already there. Over time, the mind learns that pauses are safe. It stops resisting them. Clarity begins to appear faster. You need less time to reset because the nervous system trusts that rest is coming. Mental pauses also improve focus. When the mind knows it will get breaks, it engages more fully. Attention becomes sharper. Distraction decreases. This is why people who take intentional pauses often get more done with less effort. You can place pauses anywhere. Before opening your phone, after finishing a conversation, while waiting for something to load. These moments already exist. You are just using them differently. The pause does not need to be noticeable to others. It is internal. Another benefit is cumulative. Each pause prevents a small amount of mental clutter. Over a day, this adds up. By evening, you feel less drained. Your thoughts slow naturally. Sleep comes easier because the mind is not carrying unresolved momentum. Using mental pauses consistently changes your baseline. Overwhelm becomes less frequent. When it does arise, you notice it sooner. You adjust earlier. This prevents escalation. Mental pauses do not remove responsibility. They make responsibility sustainable. You still act. You still decide. You still move forward, but you do so with a mind that is organized instead of overloaded. Eventually, pausing becomes automatic. The mind inserts space on its own. You breathe without reminding yourself. You soften without effort. Overwhelm loses its grip because it no longer has uninterrupted momentum. Using mental pauses to prevent overwhelm is not about escaping life. It is about creating rhythm within it, small moments of stillness woven into action. Those moments protect clarity before it is lost. And when clarity is protected early, overwhelm does not need to be managed later. It simply has less room to form. Rebuilding trust in your own thinking. At some point, many people stop trusting their own mind. Decisions feel heavy. Thoughts feel unreliable. You second-guess yourself even on simple things. You replay conversations. You look for reassurance outside yourself before listening inward. This does not happen because you suddenly became incapable of thinking clearly. It happens because your trust was slowly eroded over time. Mental overload is one reason. When your mind is constantly busy, clarity becomes inconsistent. Some days you feel sharp. Other days you feel foggy. That inconsistency makes you doubt yourself. You start believing that your thinking cannot be relied on, so you compensate by overthinking. Ironically, that makes the problem worse. Another reason trust breaks down is emotional interference. Strong emotions cloud perception. Stress, fear, and urgency push thoughts into extremes. When you make decisions from those states and later regret them, your mind learns a dangerous lesson. It starts believing that thinking itself is unsafe, so it hesitates. It stalls. It seeks certainty where none exists. Rebuilding trust begins with understanding this. Your mind did not fail you. It was overloaded, rushed, or emotionally hijacked. That distinction matters. Trust cannot grow if you blame yourself for states that were never designed to produce clarity. The first step is slowing the relationship with your thoughts. Not slowing life, but slowing how quickly you react to what appears in your mind. Thoughts are suggestions, not commands. When you pause before acting on them, you create space for discernment. Over time, this teaches your mind that it does not need to shout to be heard. Another important shift is separating clarity from certainty. Many people think trusting their thinking means never doubting. That is not true. Trust means knowing you can navigate uncertainty without collapsing into confusion. Clear thinking does not eliminate doubt. It holds doubt without panic. Small decisions are where trust is rebuilt. Low-risk choices. What to focus on next, when to rest, when to speak. Each time you listen to yourself and follow through, you reinforce confidence. The nervous system learns that internal signals are safe to act on again. It is also essential to notice how self-criticism undermines trust. Harsh internal commentary teaches the mind that mistakes are dangerous. When mistakes feel threatening, thinking becomes rigid. Curiosity disappears. Rebuilding trust requires kindness. You allow room for error without punishment. That flexibility restores mental fluidity. Emotional regulation plays a big role here. When emotions are acknowledged instead of suppressed, they stop distorting thought. Naming what you feel brings the nervous system back into balance. From that state, thinking becomes clearer. You trust it more because it is not fighting internal noise. Another layer is reclaiming intuition. Intuition is not mystical. It is pattern recognition shaped by experience. When you constantly override it with overanalysis, it weakens. When you listen and test it gently, it strengthens. You do not have to follow every instinct. Just notice it. Over time, patterns emerge. The validating truth is that trust in thinking is not rebuilt by forcing confidence. It grows through repeated evidence. Each calm decision. Each moment you pause instead of spiraling. Each time you choose clarity over panic. These moments accumulate quietly. You may notice discomfort as trust rebuilds. Letting go of overthinking can feel risky. Doubt may arise. What if I miss something? What if I am wrong? This discomfort is a sign of growth. You are stepping out of hyper-vigilance and into balance. As trust returns, thinking becomes simpler. You spend less time rehearsing, less time defending decisions internally. Thoughts feel cleaner. Not because life is simpler, but because your relationship with your mind has stabilized. Eventually, you stop needing constant reassurance. You still seek information. You still reflect, but you no longer abandon yourself in the process. Your inner voice becomes a partner instead of an adversary. Rebuilding trust in your own thinking is one of the most freeing shifts you can make. It reduces anxiety. It improves decision-making. It restores confidence without arrogance. You stop fighting your mind and start working with it. And when you trust your thinking again, clarity feels natural. Not forced. Not fragile. Just present. You move through life knowing that even when things are uncertain, your mind knows how to orient, adjust, and choose wisely. That trust becomes a foundation. One that supports calm, clarity, and resilience long after the noise has faded.